Perhaps this campaign is fronted by a former Russian spy who served time in an American prison. But that's another story. That's all from Assignment. I'm Lucy Ash. The producer was Linda Presley. Penny Murphy is the editor.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and thanks for joining us. 10 degrees right now in Winnipeg. Today's high is going to be 26. It's going to be hot. Thanks for being with us on this show. You're with CBC's Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and on YouTube. So wherever you are, thanks for being here. We're here till 8:37 a.m. And if you need us on the commute this morning, 788-3093. I'm throwing lots of numbers at you. Why don't we throw some names at you this morning and say good morning to our team? Good morning to Mr. Corey Funk. Corey is directing the show, and he will be on the air covering your commute. Speaking of which, in addition, good morning to Mr. Abby Adeyemi behind the controls, our senior tech. Abby will be on air covering our beautiful forecast today. And then we also have Brad Lillies in the control room, waving hello to you on YouTube. He is our YouTube producer. And so if you want to watch the show, you can check it out there. We have a lot coming up to tell you about, but why don't we start with the news? Heather Wells is here with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, crime in downtown Winnipeg is declining, but shoplifting, still a problem. Those are some of the takeaways as Winnipeg police released their annual statistical report. Shoplifting increased 41% last year compared to 2023. Officers say increased enforcement is a big reason for that bigger number. We're going to hear from a business owner in downtown Winnipeg coming up. And giving up home ice advantage, that is what Winnipeg Jets head coach Scott Arniel says his team has done with last night's loss in Game 1 of the playoff series against the Dallas Stars. The Jets fell 3-2. Arniel says his team did not play like it was a playoff game. Game 2 goes here in Winnipeg tomorrow night. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
We'll have lots of time to talk about that game this morning, right? In the show this morning, we are going to be talking about, hockey a little bit. First of all, we're going to start by hearing what NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman had to say about the Jets' success so far this season overall. So we'll hear that actually right after World Report at 6. In addition, Peter Mansbridge on the program today. It's the 80th anniversary of Victory Day in Europe, and we are going to hear more about Peter Mansbridge reflecting on the anniversary. He, of course, a longtime Canadian journalist and CBC anchor. And then a little bit later in the program, we have quite a guest. Dr. Peter Hotez is on the show today. He was on Time Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in global health last year. Stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power.
What happens when you experience the unthinkable? The songwriter Nick Cave had dedicated himself to his craft when, in a short amount of time, he lost 2 of his sons. Nick Cave will be here to tell you how that changed his outlook on work, on life, and God.
It took a long time for me to fundamentally connect to people.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The U.S. and U.K. are expected to announce a major trade deal today. President Donald Trump has been posting obscure messages on social media, but this morning officials in London have confirmed an agreement has in fact been reached. This makes the U.K. the first country to cut a deal since Trump announced his global tariffs last month. Nick Harper is following developments from Washington. And Nick, what do we know about the deal so far?
Well, Marcia, the UK has wanted a trade deal with the US ever since Brexit, when it withdrew from the European Union back in 2020. But of course, Donald Trump's tariffs have sped up the process. President Trump has posted this morning on social media a couple of times. He's written that this should be a very big and exciting day for the US and UK. He's calling it a full and comprehensive deal which will cement the relationship, he says, for many years to come. However, the details are a little thin, but we do know what both sides want. The UK wants to remove the 25% tariff on UK steel and the 25% tariff on UK cars entering the US. Washington, in return, wants a deal on pharmaceuticals and technology, in particular for the UK to remove the digital services tax that UK tech companies have to pay.
Donald Trump's post last night suggested more deals were in the works. What other countries are close to agreements with the U.S.?
Yeah, the White House is saying that talks are underway with 16 other trading partners. The most advanced of those talks seem to be with Japan and South Korea. They've both had trade delegations in the US over the last few weeks. Also, India, the US Vice President was there a couple of weeks ago. And this weekend, talks are finally getting underway between the US and China. The US, though, is downplaying expectations of a quick deal with Beijing. They're saying that these initial talks are more about trying to de-escalate before both sides can move forward. Marcia?
Thank you so much, Nick.
You're welcome.
Reporter Nick Harper in Washington. India says it has no intention of escalating the conflict with Pakistan, but there was a second act of aggression between the two nuclear powers overnight. India launched drones at Pakistan's air defense systems. It says this is retaliation for the deadly attack in India-administered Kashmir last month, an attack India insists was orchestrated by Islamabad. Hira Mustafa has the latest.
A day after India targeted what it calls terror camps inside Pakistan, Pakistan military says it has intercepted at least 24 Indian drones. It says they targeted multiple cities and a military installation in Lahore. General Ahmed Sharif is Pakistan's military spokesperson.
The international community can visibly see the path that India is treading through this extremely provocative military aggression.
Pakistan's Punjab province has declared a state of emergency. Medical facilities have been asked to have staff available round the clock and delay all non-emergency surgeries. India is confirming it targeted air defense systems in Pakistan. It says this is in response to Pakistan trying to hit military targets in North and Western India. Here is Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar.
It is not our intention to escalate the situation. However, if there are military attacks on us, there should be no doubt that it will be met with a very, very firm response.
Across both countries, flights have been suspended and airports are shut down. Thousands of people have been moved away from the frontier in the disputed region of Kashmir, and the international community is still urging restraint. China and the United States have both offered to mediate, an offer that neither Pakistan or India have accepted. Hira Mustafa, CBC News, Islamabad.
Lithuania's parliament has just voted in favor of withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention. It is an international treaty banning the use of anti-personnel landmines. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and Finland are the 5 NATO countries that border Russia. They all say they need to exit the agreement. They say they need to be able to respond to the military threats from their much larger neighbor. No new pope has been elected yet today. The crowd in St. Peter's Square reacts to the latest result of the papal conclave. Black smoke rises from the Sistine Chapel chimney, meaning the cardinals do not have a decision on Pope Francis's successor. They held their second and third rounds of balloting this morning. The cardinals are now on a break, but there will be a fourth and, if needed, a fifth vote later today. Some Vatican watchers say it could take a few more days until one of the cardinals achieves the needed 2/3 support. A grieving mother in the UK is urging parents here in Canada to take the threat from measles seriously. The number of cases continues to grow in Ontario and Alberta. And as Jennifer Yoon tells us, the disease can be devastating.
Our family's been through hell.
A parent's nightmare, helplessly watching your child dying in a hospital bed because of a measles infection. Rebecca Archer says she didn't realize just how serious the virus can be.
The fact that it was measles, I just couldn't get my head around it.
10-year-old Renee was infected as an infant, too little to be vaccinated, during an outbreak in Manchester, UK back in 2013. She seemed to recover, but the measles virus stayed dormant in her brain for years. When it finally attacked her nervous system, she had seizures, couldn't talk, eat, even stay conscious.
Yeah, they told me that it was going to be fatal and she'd have no brain activity.
Renee had a rare complication of measles called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. Infectious disease specialist Michelle Barton worries a child in Canada will die of that or of any other complications like pneumonia, as measles rips through unvaccinated children in parts of Ontario and Alberta, putting those who are immunocompromised or too young for the jab at risk.
We wouldn't normally think about it in a developed world setting where measles had been eradicated.
Rebecca is begging parents to get vaccinated. She says her child would still be alive if others were immunized against measles.
That injection could save your child's life, like it could have with my child.
She's hoping others understand the stakes. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
In Newfoundland, fire crews are waiting for the fog to lift. Water bombers are standing by to help battle the flames threatening Small Point, Adams Cove, Blackhead, Broad Cove. About 400 people live there, but it is also home to some seasonal residents. The fire is still out of control, and Mayor Curtis Delaney says the town is under a state of emergency.
As far as we know right now, there's been no injuries. There's been property damage and homes lost. But everyone is currently safe. They have somewhere to go. So everyone is doing good this morning.
He says fire crews believe at least 12 homes have been destroyed. Nearby community centers are open for people who need shelter. A game that's popular with high school students has police in Canada warning it's dangerous. Senior Assassin involves tracking down players and shooting them with water, gel, or foam dart guns. Police say the fun becomes unsafe when the toys are mistaken for real guns. Idil Musa has more.
Yeah! It's supposed to be all fun and games. Teens ambushing their classmates in malls, parks, and restaurants with toy guns. But police across the country in cities from Winnipeg to Sudbury are warning.
Replica firearms look an awful lot like real firearms.
Constable James Dixon is with York Regional Police just north of Toronto. The service has recently received numerous reports of young people carrying what appear to be guns. And Dixon says that kind of misunderstanding can lead to serious trouble.
Whether it's a police-involved shooting, whether there's criminal charges of either assault with a weapon, whether there's mischief to property. There's a lot of different things that can come out of here that we're very concerned about.
Last year in Kansas, a teen was paralyzed when the father of a target shot him. In February, an 18-year-old in Florida was shot by an off-duty police officer who mistook his water gun for a real one in the dark.
Across the country, there have been tragedies and near tragedies that have occurred.
Florida State Attorney Melissa Nelson told reporters earlier this year the game has also led to traffic collisions and school evacuations.
It might seem like a game, and certainly it seems fun to young kids, but the consequences could be deadly.
Police are urging teens to make sure their toy guns look nothing like the real thing, or better yet, forgo the game altogether. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. If you like the World Report podcast, please follow us and tell a friend. It helps spread the word. I'm Marcia Young.
Mainly sunny in Winnipeg this morning at 11 degrees. Welcome to your Thursday. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. This morning on the show, right out the gate, even though the Jets lost last night, we're going to be hearing about what NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman had to say about the Winnipeg Jets season overall this season and all the success. So stay tuned. We'll hear from that. Also, in addition, 80 years ago today, bells rang out across Canada, as you've been hearing, and liberated Europe to celebrate Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender to the Allied forces. So veteran journalist Peter Mansbridge is on the show actually today. He's covered that anniversary for decades. He will reflect on the legacy of VE Day. So that's coming up live with Peter Mansbridge. And then at 10 to 7 this morning, we will hear from a researcher from McMaster University about a new study that looks at the health effects of ultra-processed food and what it does to our bodies. And it was quite a big study, 6,000 people involved across Canada. So stay tuned for their findings. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who joins us with news headlines this morning from Manitoba.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba parents are being encouraged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Manitoba public health officials say low immunization rates in the Southern Health region have contributed to a spike in cases in the Winkler area. Cases have also been reported in the Dugald area. We're going to hear from a pediatrician and assistant professor at the University of Manitoba coming up. And a Winnipegger whose license was suspended during a crackdown on cannabis-impaired driving says police are using flawed tests. Sean Vipon was stopped after going into a dispensary. He says police swabbed his mouth and he tested positive, even though 20 hours had passed since he had consumed the drug. That story and more coming up at 6:30.
Thanks, Heather. You watched that game last night?
Just the start of it, because, I mean, it started later than anticipated anyway. Because
of Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto, that game went a little long. But it looked a little sloppy. That's what I told my husband. And then this morning, the coach is saying the exact same thing.
It was interesting to me. I watched actually quite a lot of it. I made it into almost the end of the second period. But for me, it was like, at first I was watching like, okay, this is not the same team we were playing. So, you get used to the different pace, different style, different, and the completely different play from St. Louis, right? But it was just interesting to watch how it was slower in some ways. I don't know. And then the coach, I think, put it perfectly. One of the things he said that I kind of was feeling last night was like I was watching a regular season game.
Exactly.
So, and Dallas doesn't usually win. I think their record's even 0-8 for winning game ones. So, but as someone said last night, it's better to, if they want to win game 1, that's great. We want to win game 7, should it come to that.
Yeah. But now we've kind of given up home ice advantage, but hopefully we can get it back because tomorrow night is game 2.
All right. And Friday, hopefully if you don't work Saturday morning, people can stay up late, right? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still a nice night, though, to be out in Winnipeg. Of course, let's find out what today's going to bring weather-wise. Abby Adiyemi joins us on air. Hello.
Good morning. We're looking at a warm and sunny day today. It will get breezy in some areas. There's a slight chance of showers later in the forecast in some parts of the southern region, while we still have that smoke in play for the power and flame flung due to wildfires in the area. Right now in Winnipeg, it is clear, temperatures around 10-11 degrees. As we move through the day, expect plenty of sunshine and a warm afternoon ahead. It feels quite breezy at some point. The winds will come from the south and temperatures will be climbing to a high of 26 for today. And then later tonight, we'll see some clouds roll in. We do have that slim chance of showers overnight just to cool things off, and that should be the play into tomorrow. In other regions, we're seeing 10 and 9 degrees in most regions in the southern parts of the province, and it's still cool up north.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need rain. So anything will do. Let's get into what's happening on the morning commute. Corey Funk is in. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, very quiet commute so far. Haven't heard of any major issues. I imagine maybe some people even booked the day off today after the Jets game. But if you do see something going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line if you're walking, biking, driving. 204-788-3093.
Well, as we've been discussing, a tough start for the Jets last night to this series as they kick off round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Dallas Stars. Now, they did lose in the end 3-2, despite having that home ice advantage, but still lots of top-notch hockey to be played. So we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow night. But the Jets' season was monumental, and it has been a big boost for ticket sales. Last season, the Jets were struggling to fill Canada Life Centre for games. It led to speculation about the team's future in our city, but now they've sold out the last 13 games in a row. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman was in town yesterday. Reporters asked him ahead of last night's game about what he thinks about the Winnipeg Jets' change in fortunes.
I don't think that the tickets is an issue. Buildings sold out, as you said, 13th straight sellout. I think the club, the organization, had to go through a process of transitioning the season ticket base. It's not the first time I've seen a club have to go through that. It's happened in other clubs where your fan base starts aging and you have to get it younger. And based on how quickly and how tickets were initially sold here, initially when the team came back, I didn't think it was a long-term issue. Obviously, fan support is the lifeblood of any franchise, but I've never worried about Winnipeg long-term. It was really more about repositioning what had to be done, and things are great. And, you have moments like Sunday night. That's going to be in people's minds for a long, long time, and a connection to the club and to hockey and to the city, because sports brings people together. The Jets brings people of Winnipeg together. It's part of the community. It's part of the quality of life here, and I think people recognize that.
Just wondering, when you see some of the scenes in Winnipeg from Game 7 this past weekend, but even this
messes up the traffic here. I had a little, but yeah.
What kind of goes through your head and all the other people at the top of the league when you see the way this community embraces the team here?
What goes through my mind is it's all good, right? It's the reason we have a team here. It's the reason Winnipeg is an important part of the league. And whether, the outdoor viewing games, and they now seem to be pretty normal, and the number of people that show up, and I suppose in my younger days it would be fun to stand outside with a group, but it goes to the point that sports brings people together. Not everybody at one of these outdoor viewing sessions, they don't know each other, but they're all part of the community, and everybody has something in common that brings them together, namely the Jets. And to me, that's all good.
So that was Gary Bettman talking, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman speaking with reporters in Winnipeg before last night's game, which the Jets did go on to ultimately lose 3-2. The Jets will play the Stars again here at home in Game 2 tomorrow night, and puck drop is at 8:30.
Terry O'Reilly reads a lot of books while researching Under the Influence, and often he stumbles on great stories that don't fit into regular episodes, like the Bible with a wicked typo. Whoops. A hit song about a hot air balloon. And
live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Bookmarks on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
I should mention the Professional Women's Hockey League standings, playoffs continue as well. So we're going to have more on the scores and all the other things going on around the world of sports in about an hour from now when Scott Regehr joins us with our report. Well, a bit of music next on the show. It has been over 15 years since Amy Milan released some music, solo music. The singer from Stars and Broken Social Scene releases I Want to Find You on May 30th. So she has announced several tour dates for 2025. We have a tune from the new album. This is called Wire Walks.
How you hold on to bad news. I want to carry sad out of you. You said at night when the day lost the light. If I'm walking on a
Amy Milan and Wirewalks. Her new album's due out May 30th. Sorry, Jets fans. If you're up late watching the game, this kind of ethereal tune might be a little bit sleepy for you. It's chill, right? Feels more like Friday night with a glass of wine. I like that. It is right now 6:23 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is mainly sunny right now already in Winnipeg, and we're going to stay there for the day. Windy, though. We've had some really windy days here. It's going to blow around all that dust out there. A high of 26, and winds are going to be 30 to 50 this afternoon. We might even see gusts up to 70 this afternoon. So just note that, if especially if you're cycling, right? It can be an issue. In Winnipeg right now, I said 11, but in Brandon, it's clear. It's just 4 degrees, and in Thompson, it's partly cloudy, and it's 9 degrees. Well, I've just been watching on CBC Newsnet while the show's on in the corner of my eye here, all of what is happening overseas. 80 years since the end of World War II in Europe, the royal family gathering, people on the streets, flags waving. 80 years ago today, bells rang out all across Canada as well and liberated Europe to celebrate Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender to the Allied forces. Well, veteran Canadian journalist Peter Mansbridge has covered this anniversary for decades, doing live TV broadcasts for CBC Television from the Netherlands, which Canadian soldiers liberated, of course, and reporting from France, where Allied soldiers landed on D-Day. So we thought we'd touch base with Peter Mansbridge and hear what he's thinking about on this special 80th anniversary. And the former host of CBC Television's The National joins us from Scotland, actually, and he's here via Zoom. Hi to you.
Hey, Marcy. Good to talk to you.
You too. So what are you thinking about today? 80 years.
Well, 80 years, it's amazing, and it's especially amazing that, you know, a good number of vets are still around to share this moment with us, and some of them went overseas to take part in the various ceremonies that will take part. Listen, it was a horrible war. More than 50 million people died worldwide in that war, 45,000 of them from Canada. So today and that day are kind of odd. In one way, you're celebrating, and the other way, there's relief, there's reflection, there's remembrance. But the bottom line on VE Day was celebration. And that's why you still see the old pictures, whether it was in London or New York or Toronto or wherever it might be, and I'm sure there was some in Winnipeg, where there was, kind of dancing in the street. There were strangers hugging each other, kissing each other, because it was over. Because people were coming home, the lucky ones. Some would never come home. But they were remembered that night. And especially so in the homes that they'd left to go overseas to fight in. So it's a day of many different emotions, still today.
May 8th, 1945, you're drawing on, the scenes in Europe, but also the scenes here in Canada, as you alluded to, Peter. Can you reflect on a story or maybe stories that you've shared over the years, from Canada, people that you've met, who would have lived this?
Well, you never forget the veterans you meet, whether it was, in the Netherlands at those ceremonies or in France and the D-Day ceremonies. These guys were amazing. Most of them were many of them were from small towns on the prairies, in southwestern Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes, Newfoundland, even though Newfoundland at that time wasn't part of Canada. But they were all volunteers. Nobody forced them to go. Almost all of them were volunteers. They believed that it was the duty to go and fight for their country and fight for future generations, people like us, who have managed to live in the kind of country that we live in, thanks to a lot of what they did during the Second World War. So when you meet these fellows, whether it's in France or in the Netherlands or Belgium or wherever it may be, Italy, who go back to where they had fought, it's a moving experience, and it's one that we should never take for granted, because we're losing these fellows. It won't be long before none of them left. Many of them are just who went over this week, or over 100. So they're quite something.
What are the big lessons, do you think, of the Second World War that historians are saying right now are key for our current era?
Well, historians can be split on things like this, as as we know, and there's always a great deal of discussion about the value of war. But some wars are worth fighting, and that's what the veterans will tell you, that this was one of them, that some things are worth dying for. And a lot of people died as a result of that war, both military people and civilians. But it was about a way of life. And it was about ending a Nazi scourge, one we didn't want to see repeated in our country. And that's why these fellows went overseas and joined, whether it was, the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, because they believed it was the right thing to do. And you see that kind of echoed in conflicts today. You certainly see it echoed in Ukraine, where the Ukrainian people believe it's worth fighting and dying for to save our country from somebody else's, attempt to control our lives. So, yes, some things are worth dying for.
Thank you for the reflection, Peter, and thank you so much for being on with us this morning. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Marcy. Take care.
You too. Peter Mansbridge, a former host of CBC Television's The National, chief correspondent for CBC News. He now produces a podcast called The Bridge Daily. We reached him in Scotland this morning. More coverage of VE Day coming up on all of our newscasts, but certainly at 7 o'clock on World Report as teams are on site in Europe. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio. We are live from downtown Winnipeg this morning on 89.3 FM. If you need anything on your morning commute to pass along, or if you spot any problems, please give us a call at 788-3093. And I'll just mention that we do have business news coming up here, and Christelle Ramlicam will join us with that report right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 11 degrees. It's going to be sunny again today, but the real story in the weather is that wind. It is going to be south 30, gusting to 50, and then increasing to gusts at 70 around noon today, a high of 26. Crime in downtown Winnipeg is declining, but shoplifting? Still a problem. Those are some takeaways as police released their annual statistics report. Shoplifting increased 41% last year compared to 2023. Officers say increased enforcement is a big reason the number has grown. Downtown Family Foods owner Kushnan Zalawadia says he would like to see even more of a police crackdown.
My chief concern is to prevent the theft. Yes, sometimes we catch them, but we know whom we can stop. Not everyone, especially when someone is looking threatening.
Zalawadia says the store reports thefts to police, but he worries it takes too long. He'd like to see faster responses to shoplifting. Manitoba parents are being encouraged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Manitoba public health officials say low immunization rates in the Southern Health region are contributing to a spike in cases in the Winkler area. Cases have also been reported in the Dugald area. Ruth Grimes is a pediatrician and assistant professor at the University of Manitoba.
My chief concern is having more widespread outbreak of measles, having a measles epidemic. I think that would be the fear of every pediatrician and every physician who's caring for children.
Grimes is fielding more questions from parents worried their kids' vaccines are up to date. Experts say a positive cannabis test is not a surefire way to determine if someone is under the influence. Robert Laprairie at the University of Saskatchewan says metabolism rates for the drug vary widely from person to person. He says oral fluid tests police use to measure cannabis intoxication are not breathalyzers and cannot effectively prove impairment.
More research is needed. I think that we need better tools to understand impairment in terms of what would be impairing in THC use or cannabis use.
A Winnipeg man claims he tested positive during a police crackdown on drug-impaired drivers, even though more than 20 hours had passed since he consumed cannabis. Winnipeg police maintain their screening equipment is approved by the Criminal Code. Manitoba's premier wants to gauge interest in the private sector to pay for massive infrastructure projects. Wab Kinew sent a letter to the Prime Minister pitching a federal-provincial partnership on nation-building strategies. They include creating a trade corridor through the Port of Churchill. Kinew says it's time to expand collaboration efforts in this country.
To me, these projects make sense when it's not just solely reliant on the public, that it's actually the private sector that's going to drive a lot of the investment and also a lot of the returns. We got a window open right now. Canadians are thinking about these big projects, thinking about how we can build up our economy together.
Kinew says if Manitoba can bring Indigenous partners to the table, it can unlock economic activity here. His letter to the Prime Minister also calls for completion of the twinning of the Trans-Canada Highway in Manitoba. To the Vatican now, where black smoke drifted out of the chimney today at the Sistine Chapel. That is the sign on the second day of voting. The sequestered cardinals have failed to reach the two-thirds majority needed to elect the next pope. There have been 3 ballots so far, with 2 more possible before the end of the day. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says the Winnipeg Jets' whiteout parties are an example of sports bringing people together. Bettman in Winnipeg yesterday ahead of the Jets' Game 1 showdown against the Dallas Stars.
It's the reason Winnipeg is an important part of the league. You know, not everybody at one of these outdoor viewing sessions, they don't know each other, but they're all part of the community, and everybody has something in common that brings them together, namely the Jets.
Well, the Jets were falling in Game 1. Mark Scheifele in the second period on Sportsnet, scoring on his first game back after injury. Still, the Jets lose Game 1 against the Dallas Stars 3-2. Jets head coach Scott Arniel didn't like what he saw from his team.
That was right out of the gate. I thought our detail, whether that was on face-off execution when we won draws, whether that was, tape-to-tape passing, just execution, there was a lot of sloppiness to that game. That did not feel like a playoff game in Game 1 and Round 2. That felt like Game 45 in the middle of December.
Arniel says his team gave up home ice advantage. We'll see if they can even it up because Game 2 is still on home ice tomorrow night at Canada Life Centre. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get to what's happening in our weather forecast today. Abby is here to walk us through the regions. Good morning.
Good morning. It's going to be sunny and warm for most of the province today. Few regions will see some windy conditions. Like here in Winnipeg, we'll be seeing that wind gusts in play. And we also have smoke affecting regions in the Pa, Flin Flon, and surrounding areas due to that wildfire in that region. Hot spots in the province already. Dauphin is at 17 degrees and warming close to 30 today. Looking at conditions in Winnipeg right now, it is 11, mainly clear skies. The sun already made its appearance. Expect a warm afternoon, a high of 26 in the city today with some windy conditions coming from the south, so prepare for that. In the Pembina Valley region, Morden, Morris, Winkler, Altona, similar conditions we're seeing at this time. Sunny starts already with clear skies. Temperatures around 8 degrees, warming close to 28 for that region. In the Westman region, Brandon is sitting at 4 degrees and clear. The sun is also out. Expect a sunny day, high of 27. Gets windy as you get into the day. In the Parkland region, 16 degrees in Dauphin at this time. A mix of sun and clouds in the forecast today. A good chance of showers and thunderstorm in the forecast. For that region, you'll be warming up to 30 degrees. The Interlake region, Gimli's waking up to 8 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Today will be sunny for you also. Light breeze and then gets windy at some point. Highs gets to 22. Up north, the path Flin Flon surrounding areas right now, 8 degrees also. We do have that smoke advisory in effect for that region. Smoke from wildfire is affecting air quality for that region, and visibility can also be impacted. Expect a mix of sun and clouds to come with that. A slight chance of showers later in the day with a risk of thunderstorm. High will get to 26. Thompson, good morning. You are at 10 degrees at this point. Partly cloudy. You are seeing Expect a mix of sun and clouds and breezy south winds. Highs would get to 21. And then further north, we're seeing temperatures around 5 degrees, 6 degrees in Churchill. The day will get sunny, turning to cloudy conditions in the afternoon, warming up to 18. There's also a chance of rain in the forecast. So overall, expect a sunny and a warm condition in most of the southern and central regions, and a few clouds and windy conditions to come with that. And then up north, a bit colder with the smoke in play affecting the power flame and surrounding areas. Scattered showers also will be coming to that part of the province. But right now in the city, it is 11 degrees and we are warming up to a beautiful 26 today.
You know what, Abby and Corey Funk, who's here to do the commute in a minute and cover what's going on out there for y'all. I just want to mention a few things that I posted on Facebook because there's this huge conversations going on from our listeners. So I'm going to share a couple of the samples. I think you guys will like these. So first of all, Monday is Manitoba Day, May the 12th. So I was just asking people if they're creative. Do they have a song, a poem, a cool provincial story? So I'd love to hear that. If you're out listening this morning, I just want to invite you to the listener line, 788-3205. And you can also look online. A lot of people are writing things to us. Susan Carroll says there's a soundtrack to my early travel days. She's got this sort of screenshot of this. It looks like the front of a CD. It says Manitoba Songs, Rick Neufeld and Prairie Dog. So we'll have to dig up some of that, I think, for Monday. And then other people just talking about naming tunes. You know, Mary Swain saying Tara Williamson has a beautiful song called The Prairies. And she says she also happens to be my niece. So it's local music. She doesn't live in Manitoba anymore, the artist. But a lot of people writing in about that. But the one that really took off, and I'm not sure how we're going to be able to mash all this together because we're going to run out of time. But I asked people what song we could play for their mom and to tell us why they chose it. Now, there's about 40 comments of beautiful stories about why people think of their moms when they hear, certain tunes. And so hopefully we can get some of that on. We were talking about this yesterday. You do have this with your mom, right, Corey?
Yeah, my mom can't get through It's a Wonderful World by Louis
nice.
Armstrong without crying because apparently the lore goes that it was playing while I was being born.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yes, yeah. So that's her. That's the song that really gets her.
I love that. Abby, I'm not sure if you had one.
No, my mom was a Jim Reeves person and always having Jim Reeves Christmas tunes. I guess that's what made me this Christmassy person. There's always, I don't know if it's playing all season long, but there's always Jim Reeves playing in the house.
Maybe that's why you were in the pageant every single year until you were like
don't bring that up, Marcy.
19 and still playing a shepherd. I'm just kidding. Mine is Maria. And it's so strange because my mom's middle name is Maria, but there was this song back in the day. It was a country tune because there's a lot of tunes called Maria, actually. But it's that one that goes, Maria, Maria, I love you. Can you imagine that one?
Nope.
Look at Corey's going, not at all. Abby's going, yes, I can. Everyone's going, stop singing. It's 6:41. Yes, so that one, I don't know. My mom used to just love that song. I just have, just every time it would have been on back in the day in that era, which would have been probably the 80s, early 80s when I was a little kid. It's just joy. And it was her middle name. So all these stories are beautiful that you're writing to us about your moms. We're going to try to share some of them tomorrow because Mother's Day is on Sunday. And then if we can, we'll see if we can do a bit of a mashup of some of the songs that you put forward. But it'll be really hard to get 38 of them in because the show's only, 2.5 hours. So, Corey Funk, you are here for the commute. Anything to update?
No, nothing to update. Seems like things are going pretty smoothly out there. But if it's not for you, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Christelle Ramlakan is here with our News Now, Business News Now, and she is every morning with our report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So why don't we start with plans that are in place now for further discussions on Canada's economic state? Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, so Canada's premiers and Prime Minister Mark Carney will meet in Saskatoon on June 2nd to discuss ways to work together to make the country stronger. So in a social media post, Carney says in the face of immediate trade pressures, he and the premiers are focused on building up Canada's economic resilience. And he goes on to say that means launching big nation-building projects, removing internal trade barriers, and building one Canadian economy. So, of course, Carney also spoke with premiers yesterday to debrief them on his first meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. As we know, Canada still is absorbing a barrage of American tariffs. So, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the premiers congratulated the Prime Minister on the restraint he showed during his meeting with Trump. And the Prime Minister's office says the productive discussion focused on the Canada-U.S. relationship and reinforcing Canada's strength at home. And the Prime Minister has also reaffirmed his commitment to table federal legislation to eliminate federal trade barriers by Canada Day.
Let's stay with trade news. Trump is expected to make an announcement today about trade in the UK, we understand, right?
Yeah, so President Trump is expected to announce a framework of a trade deal with the UK. So Trump teased the announcement late yesterday on Truth Social as being one with a big and highly respected country. Experts say the announcement is likely an agreement to start negotiations that would identify a framework of issues to be discussed in the coming months, including, possibly things like tariff rates, non-tariff barriers, and digital trade. So the U.S. is the UK's biggest single trading partner, but British officials have been skeptical about if a deal could really be signed quickly. So officials still caution that the pact won't be a comprehensive trade agreement and that some details remain to be finalized. So British officials have argued, though, in the past that the trading relationship between the two nations is already broadly balanced. But last month, the U.S. imposed a 10% tariff on most goods imported from the UK as part of a baseline tariff imposed on most nations. Britain is also subject to 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports. And the UK is hoping to get a reduction on those tariffs. But officials say the baseline 10% tariff will likely remain in place. And in return, Britain may offer concessions on a digital tax it levies on big U.S. tech companies. And that's according to officials familiar with the matter.
And I cannot keep up with all the changes at Netflix, but there's more, right?
Yeah, so the streaming giant is getting its first real big overhaul in 12 years. So the streamer says it will begin testing AI-boosted search, which will first appear as an opt-in beta test on mobile. So users will be able to discover content using natural conversational phrases like, I want to see something funny or I want to see something upbeat. There will also be a TikTok-like vertical video feed on mobile that will have clips from shows and movies that people can scroll through to find something that they want to watch. And the main menu is being moved from the left-hand side to the middle, similar to rival Apple TV. Content descriptions will appear more compact and recommendations will be more personalized in real time based on browsing behavior. And the new menu is going to emphasize more of Netflix's live events and gaming offerings, signaling the streaming giant's ambitions outside of film and TV. And the company plans to roll out these changes in the next weeks and months.
What are the numbers looking like this morning?
In Europe, stocks are rallying on hopes of a UK-US trade deal. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is up. In Asia, markets are mostly higher. Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up. Oil is up $1.03 to $59.10 US per barrel. Gold is down $21.30 to $3,342.80 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost a quarter of a cent to 72 cents US.
All right, thanks, Crystal Lee. Appreciate it. That's Crystal Lee Ramlakan, and she joins us every morning with our business news. It is 13 minutes now to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Stay tuned because coming up in the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to hear from a researcher who worked on a study about ultra-processed foods and their effects on our bodies. So we're going to find out more about what she found. So stay tuned for that. And right now, though, let's talk about something that a lot of Manitobans are watching. And this is because we are part of the West, but Are we part of the conversation about separation? Most Albertans, it turns out, do not want to separate from the rest of Canada. Now, this is according to new polling data from the Research Co. Yet, the possibility of separation is stronger than those numbers indicate. And you might have been watching as a Manitoban what's being said by the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, and what she said about the possibility of, she's open to anyone bringing forward any kind of a referendum if there were one to be brought forward on separation, although she has said herself that she is for unity. But this continues to come up, this idea about Alberta separating and effectively the West separating. You might recall a former Reform leader, Preston Manning, right, talking about this in the campaign trail. Well, let's look at this polling research. Here's CBC's Calgary's Rob Brown to explain.
Could it actually happen? Alberta calling it quits with Canada after a 120-year-long marriage? Most Albertans apparently think so, even if they don't want it.
We're looking at a majority of people who are right now looking at Alberta separation as an issue that is real. It's certainly different from what we see in other parts of the country where the numbers are lower. We don't see any other part of Canada where we reach such a high number of people who say this is a real possibility.
Mario Canseco asked 1,200 Canadians who had just voted to think about the effect a Liberal win could have in provinces where most people vote Conservative, Alberta in particular. The pollster found 65% of Canadians don't want Alberta to leave. 64% of Albertans say the same. However, he also found that 58% of Albertans think separation is a real possibility, and 28% of voters in the province would welcome it. So why would a majority of Albertans think separation could happen if only a minority actually wanted to? I mean, there's always been an element at the fringes with an appetite for the idea. What's changed? Well, in recent months, Trump's talk of a 51st state has normalized a new challenge to Confederation. And then domestically, those who've been keeping an eye on this stuff for decades have been warning that the idea of Alberta separating is not feeling as fringy as it used to.
There's a danger that if the Carney Liberals are returned to office, you're going to trigger a secession-type movement.
Since the Carney Liberals were returned to office, organizers of a push for a referendum on the question of secession tell CBC News they've seen a surge in interest. So much so, the group thinks it'll be no problem securing the number of signatures needed to trigger a vote, in part because Danielle Smith is making that easier by lowering the threshold for a referendum, something she announced the day after the election.
Do you support the efforts to hold a referendum on Alberta separating from Canada?
I support the process of citizens being able to choose an issue that they care about and then being able to get enough signatures to put it to the people.
Citizens who want a separate Alberta are now calling for it outside the legislature, and Canseco is drawing a straight line from that directly to the Premier.
I think it is a factor because it lends more credibility to the cause than it's ever had before.
Smith has said she wants Alberta to remain in Canada. What she hasn't said is whether she would honor a referendum that somehow resulted in a yes vote.
The data on Alberta separatism was taken by the Research Co. The online survey was conducted with 1,201 voters between April 27th and 29th of this year. It carries a margin of error of plus or minus 2.8 percentage points, 19 times out of 20.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
So what are you eating for breakfast right now? It's 8 minutes to 7 o'clock. Are you grabbing something for your breakfast that is processed food? Are you chucking something in the lunch because it's easy and maybe it's processed food? We all eat processed food, but ultra-processed foods are all around us in the grocery store, begging to be bought, it seems. But as ubiquitous as they may be, scientists are still trying to understand the effects they have on our bodies and on our health. A team of researchers is now one step closer to closing that data gap. There's a new study out. Anthea Christoforou is an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University and a senior author of the paper. And I spoke with her at 6 o'clock about what they found.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. We should start with definitions, I think. How are you defining ultra-processed foods in this report?
Yeah, so ultra-processed foods are industrially formulated products made up of several ingredients that you and I typically wouldn't have in our everyday kitchens. Things like artificial colors and sweeteners, emulsifiers, various preservatives, and they're items like chips, soft drinks, frozen pizzas, various breakfast cereals. These products are really designed to be convenient. They're often hyper-palatable and usually heavily marketed, many times in ways that can be misleading to the consumer.
So what were some of the key findings that you found in your research?
Yeah, so our study drew on the two most recent cycles of the Canadian Health Measures Survey, with over 6,000 Canadian adults, and we found as their levels of ultra-processed foods increased, so did their risk factors for various cardiometabolic diseases. So things like they had increased BMI, increased blood pressure and blood glucose levels, increased cholesterol, and interestingly, they also had increased levels of various inflammatory markers. And these results were totally independent of a number of lifestyle and sociodemographic factors that we know can contribute to poor health, things like the age and the gender of the participants, their physical activity level, their weight, and the total amount of food that they were consuming, which really indicated to us that ultra-processed foods may be influencing our health in ways totally separate from the total amount of calories that they were consuming.
So what's going on in our bodies? How are they reacting to these foods?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we saw higher inflammation, blood sugar, blood cholesterol levels, and these are all early warning signs of chronic disease risk. And I think more work is needed to really parse out the exact mechanism by which they are impacting our health in these ways. But from our work, it appears that it may not be just about the poor nutrition in these foods and the amount of calories one is consuming, but how these foods interact with our metabolism, our gut health, or even the way they're displacing more protective, minimally processed foods from our diets.
Some people might be thinking about Size Me back in the day, right? The original doc where the guy that ate McDonald's over and over and then his body went crazy. So some people might think it seems logical that processed food, as an extension, is bad for our health. What makes the research significant in this moment?
Yeah, great question. You're right. It isn't exactly new news that these bad, quote-unquote, foods are bad for our health, but much of the previous work around this is looking at the composition of these foods in terms of their nutritional quality. And so I think what's new here is that we're seeing real biological signs of harm, like inflammation, high blood sugar, and cholesterol, even in people who aren't overweight. And we found this across the board in this large study of Canadians. So it's not just about the junk food and the weight anymore. These foods are, quietly affecting our health, I think, in deeper ways.
What does it mean moving forward, your study, do you think? What would you like to see in this country and maybe how much more research needs to be done before we do start to see change?
Yeah, certainly. So, not everyone has the same time and budget to access fresh and minimally processed foods, and I think that's an important piece to recognize here. But wherever possible, providing nutritional guidance around building meals from whole foods in their as natural form as possible. So things like including as many fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and dairy and meat products as we can. But certainly on the policy side, our research really supports stronger public health initiatives to help people cut back on these products. Things like perhaps restricting the marketing on these foods, particularly to children, and also other initiatives to make the healthy choice, I think, the easier and more affordable choice.
All right, Anthea, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
That is Anthea Christoforou, an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University and senior author of the report that we were talking about. I spoke with her at 6 o'clock this morning. I should mention that later in the program after 8, we have quite a guest and quite an interview coming up. In a world that's becoming more anti-science, how do we restore trust in science? We're going to have that conversation today with Dr. Peter Hotez. He was co-nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his vaccine work. He says mistrust in science is a, quote, new normal. So we're going to find out more about that. And that's in the backdrop of, you know, when you have studies, because we're talking about a food study here, when you have study after study and studies seem to compete with each other, how can we get back to restoring trust in science? So stay tuned. That is coming up. Right now, we're going to get headlines from Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, total crime decreased in downtown Winnipeg last year, but a local business owner says it doesn't feel like it. Kishan Zalavadia at Downtown Family Foods says shoplifting is a big problem. Retail theft did increase across the city by 41%. Winnipeg police say more enforcement is a big reason for that bigger number. Manitoba's premier sent Prime Minister Mark Carney a letter yesterday pitching federal-provincial partnership on several nation-building projects. On the same day, the PM was hosting a virtual First Ministers meeting. Canute's proposals include creating a trade corridor through the Port of Churchill and developing critical minerals infrastructure. He calls Manitoba the Costco of critical minerals. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is 11 degrees right now. It's mainly sunny in Winnipeg. Our high is 26 today with sun, but boy, it's going to be windy. Winds south 30, gusting to 50, and that's going to increase up to 70 kilometers per hour around the noon hour. But beautiful, bright sunshine out there. You're going to need the shades and to put the visor down in the car probably as well as the sunglasses. But should be a beautiful active commute if you are biking or walking this morning, or if you got to wait for the bus. 788-3093. Speaking of the commute, if you see any problems, let us know. In the next hour on CBC's Information Radio, we're going to talk to a 19-year-old who's making sure that mental health is spoken about in the Hutterite community. She says there's a lot of stigma to come out and talk about it. We're going to hear more from her and how she says social media was her saving grace for her own mental health. In addition, we are going to dig into the crime report coming up, the crime stats that Heather was mentioning in our news headlines. Cam McKidd, the Deputy Chief of the Winnipeg Police, will be our guest. Stay right here.
Today on The Current.
I'm going to tell you why the internet sucks now, whose fault it is, and my plan to fix it.
The internet is frustrating. It's full of ads, sponsored content, artificial intelligence, and trolls. In a new podcast, the tech journalist Cory Doctorow asks who broke the internet and how we can get back to the days when it was good. Cory Doctorow, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. For the second night in a row, there's been more military posturing between India and Pakistan, and tensions between the nuclear powers are soaring. Across both countries, flights have been diverted, airports have been closed, and in disputed Kashmir, people are preparing for the worst and taking shelter. Our South Asia correspondent, Salima Shivji, has more.
The day after India launched a string of missile strikes into neighboring Pakistan, tensions are high in the capital of Indian-administered Kashmir, the divided region that both India and Pakistan claim in full. Islamabad is accusing India of a second military action and of trying to provoke Pakistan using drones. Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chowdhury speaks for the Pakistan Armed Forces.
India has undertaken yet another blatant military act of aggression against Pakistan.
India says it did target air defense systems in Pakistan, but it accused that country of attempting its own drone attacks. And New Delhi says this response has been measured and justified, spurred by the militant attack last month that killed 26 men, mostly tourists. India's Foreign Affairs Minister Subramanyam Jaishankar is again saying that his country does not want the conflict to spiral.
However, if there are military attacks on us, there should be no doubt that it will be met with a very, very firm response.
Strong words of warning as heavy artillery fire is still being exchanged along the line of control, the de facto border separating Kashmir. More than a dozen people have been killed in the shelling, including a woman whose family members sit in a circle grieving. We want there to be a ceasefire fast. We're suffering, says this man, as Kashmiris wait to see if leaders of the two countries will listen to calls for de-escalation and step back from the brink of war. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
The U.S. and U.K. have struck a major trade deal. More details are expected later today. In a post on social media, U.S. President Donald Trump only says it is with a highly respected country. British officials have confirmed it's with them. It is believed the deal involves a significant reduction of some of the tariffs being imposed by both countries. This makes the UK the first country to cut a deal with Washington since Trump announced his global tariffs last month. Uganda's battle against HIV/AIDS is being severely impacted by the Trump administration's cuts to international development. Health officials in the East African country say they are falling behind on key targets to reduce infections. The latest data show close to 38,000 new infections are reported every year. Isabel Nakiria has more from Kampala.
We now trying to bring them back to the clinic due to the freeze.
Shadrach Namigade was born with HIV and has been taking antiretroviral drugs for over 2 decades. She now runs a group that supports young people living with HIV. Shadrach says the recent aid freeze by the Trump administration disrupted the treatment schedules of hundreds of adolescents under her care.
When the freeze came in, people lacked where to get the ad from, and they were afraid they're not going to be given services anymore.
Uganda largely depends on donor support to fund HIV care. Services impacted include medicines, counseling, and testing kits. The government says it will ensure patients get access to their drugs. Ruth Sanyonyi heads the Uganda AIDS Commission.
HIV and AIDS services have been integrated with other services like TB, hepatitis B, hypertension, and diabetes.
Around 1.3 million Ugandans living with HIV are receiving treatment, but many may not be able to continue with their regimens. Uganda needs an additional $133 million annually to plug the funding gap in HIV care. Isabel Nakiria for CBC News, Kampala.
Cardinals sequestered in the Sistine Chapel have again failed to elect a new pope. Black smoke came out of the chapel's chimney earlier this morning. This is the latest inconclusive vote of the conclave deciding on Pope Francis's successor. Vatican watchers say it could take a few more rounds before one of the cardinals achieves the needed 2/3 support. Big changes are coming to Yukon politics. Premier Ranj Pillay announced he is stepping down yesterday, a political surprise for the territory. Chris Winder has more on what that means for voters.
It is truly an honor, the greatest honor of my life. But my time in this role has come to an end.
Ranj Pillay ends his time as premier the same way it began, without facing voters. Pillay was acclaimed as leader of the Yukon Liberals in 2023. He leaves ahead of a fixed election date set for November. Pillay says he's simply not prepared to endure another election campaign.
You go into the fall, and if you're forming government, how do you feel about the next 4 years after that? You can succeed in an election, but then you also have to have everything you need to continue to do all that work.
The Liberals finished the last election tied with the center-right Yukon Party with 8 seats apiece. That means Pillay relied on support from the NDP to stay in power. And with at least 2 other cabinet ministers saying they won't run again either, another term for the Liberals is far from guaranteed. NDP leader Kate White.
I appreciate and thank Ranj for the work that he did, but I think this resignation really shows that this election is a two-party race. It's going to be between the Yukon NDP and the Yukon Party.
Yukon Party leader Curry Dixon declined to comment. In a statement, Dixon blamed Pillay for rising crime, a buckling healthcare system, and growing government debt. He also wished Pillay well in his future endeavors. Chris Windier, CBC News, Whitehorse.
In Newfoundland, fire crews are waiting for the fog to lift. Water bombers are standing by to help battle the flames threatening Small Point, Adams Cove, Blackhead, Broad Cove. About 400 people live there, but it is also home to some seasonal residents. The fire is still out of control, and Mayor Curtis Delaney says the town is under a state of emergency.
As far as we know right now, there's been no injuries, there's been property damage and homes lost.
but everyone is currently safe. They have somewhere to go. So everyone is doing good this morning.
He says fire crews believe at least 12 homes have been destroyed. Nearby community centers are open for people who need shelter. A mystery illness in New Brunswick may not be so mysterious after all. That is what a new article in a leading U.S. medical journal suggests. It revolves around the cause of brain illnesses found in a cluster of patients in the province. As Bobby Jean McKinnon reports, the researchers say it is a situation of poorly diagnosed cases.
She's very sick. Stacey Quigley-Cormier has watched her stepdaughter Gabrielle deteriorate for years. The 23-year-old needs a cane or wheelchair and suffers from memory and concentration issues. She's one of hundreds of people stricken by a so-called neurological syndrome of unknown cause, according to Moncton neurologist Dr. Alier Marrero. He was the first to sound the alarm about a mystery disease cluster more than 4 years ago, and Quigley-Cormier doesn't believe he was wrong. Why in a small province like New Brunswick do we have extremely rare condition that hundreds of people are experiencing when we really should only have maybe like 1 out of 100,000. Yesterday, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a report by 13 Canadian doctors and researchers who reassessed 25 of more than 200 of Marrero's patients and found each had an identifiable condition like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or cancer. Toronto neurologist Dr. Anthony Lang is one of the authors.
When we did the statistics, the chances of any of those other individuals having a mystery disease was less than 1 in a million.
In 2022, an oversight committee of 6 neurologists found potential alternative diagnoses for most of Marrero's patients. New Brunswick's Public Health Department is now conducting its own study looking at whether environmental exposures are a factor. In an emailed statement, Dr. Marrero said he profoundly disagrees with the JAMA report's findings, and he's appalled that a parallel investigation took place without his knowledge. Meanwhile, the report's authors say everyone diagnosed by Marrero should get a second opinion. Bobby G. McKinnon, CBC News, St. John.
Daddy, I'm in trouble. I think I fell in love.
It is time for some people to put dancing shoes on for the 37th Annual East Coast Music Awards Gala. It happens tonight. It's a 5-day event in St. John's. Newfoundland folk musicians Shanneyganock are expected to play at the gala. The group's co-founder, Mark Hiscock, passed away suddenly this week. Also performing Cape Breton Island's own Goldie Boutillier. Here's more of her hit single, Cowboy Gangster Politician. It has over 14 million streams on Spotify. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Another sunny, windy day on the way for Manitoba and across most of the province, but certainly in Winnipeg. Hang on to your hats, folks. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 FM 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. This hour on the program, the latest statistics from Winnipeg Police show that the most serious crimes are down, but there's been a significant spike in the number of shoplifting cases. 41% increase year over year. We're going to hear from a Winnipeg grocer this hour who says not a day goes by without someone stealing from his store. And then we're going to get a full interview and live interview with Cam McKidd on the show this morning. Deputy Chief of the Winnipeg Police will join us at 10 to 8. In addition, this hour on the program, in a moment, we're going to talk to a young woman who's going to join us. She's 19, and she wants to make sure mental health is talked about in the Hutterite community. So we're going to hear more from her and how she says social media was her saving grace. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for other headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipegger whose license was suspended during a crackdown on cannabis-impaired driving says police are using flawed tests. Sean Vipond was stopped after going into a dispensary. He says police swabbed his mouth for traces of cannabis and he tested positive, even though 20 hours had passed since he had consumed the drug. Manitoba parents are being encouraged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Ruth Grimes at the University of Manitoba, a pediatrician, is fielding more questions, she says, from parents concerned their kids' vaccines are up to date. We'll hear from her coming up in our next news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into what's happening in the forecast. So we'll have a look at just how windy it's going to get and what else is going to develop out there. As we look at the maps, if you are watching us on YouTube this morning, you're about to see all the different colors come up that represent the different temperatures, and it looks mostly green. Abby's here to explain what that actually means.
The green means it's going to be warm and sunny. That's what we're getting across the regions today. While some areas will see windy conditions and a slight chance of showers later in the day. It gets windier in the west and southern parts of the province. Looking at the conditions in Winnipeg at this time, 13 degrees. The sun is out. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast. As we go through the day, expect the sun to stick around. Temperatures will warm to 26. It's going to be a windy day, as mentioned, with the winds picking from the south, gusting all the way to 70 kilometers by the noon period. And then we'll see some clouds roll in overnight. In other regions, down south, temperatures between 10 and 13 at this point. And we'll see highs get to 28 degrees in some regions. If you travel up north, a little cooler. From the Parkland region, you track it into the powerful influence where we have that local smoke due to wildfire affecting air quality. Though we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds in that regions, and temperatures will drop to about 4 degrees later. But we'll see highs in that region get to 21 for Thompson.
Speaking of smoke, I just want to mention a couple of things here that are updates. So Kinaushtugan First Nation, as well as Peguis First Nation and Penimutang First Nation, do have their fires under control, we are told. And we are sharing now, though, that yesterday we got news that Lake Manitoba First Nation is now worried about fire there. So they have been added, to the recent declaration of the state of emergency. And so we'll watch what happens there. But it's that time of year, right? It's that season. The Premier was supposed to be on the show today. We've just changed our monthly interview to tomorrow. They had to make a change because of scheduling. So he will be here, and we'll ask him more about the wildfire situation, how the province is preparing and responding already to what's been happening in these threats. So that's tomorrow. Right now, we are going to get caught up on commuter news with Corey Funk.
And not much news to report. Actually, been a very quiet commute. But if you're out there, you see something going on, do give me a call. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, you may know that this first week of May, and in fact the whole month, is known as Mental Health Awareness Month. And next on the show, our next guest says she's no stranger to mental health awareness. She struggled herself with anxiety, depression, and trauma. Kaylee Mandel lives in a Hutterite colony in rural Portage la Prairie. She runs an Instagram account called Tearing Down Expectations. Now there, she advocates for mental health. She shares parts of her own journey as well. So with the account, she's been able to reach others in her community and beyond. And she's with us this morning. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Tell me what inspired you to start your Instagram account, Kaylee.
I did it for myself. I had this dream of telling my story because it is only mine to tell at the end of the day. I wanted to write it, to author it, and then eventually people started following me, and I got incredible responses of people, especially like young people who were talking about how much they were struggling, and moms in the Hutterite communities, and that full-blown inspired me, and it made me want to raise awareness because not everyone is aware of mental health and what it means, and it made me feel like I can make a difference. If I can make just one person feel less alone, that is something incredible.
You mentioned a lot of young people were responding. You yourself are 19. Can you share a little bit about your own story? I mentioned that you struggled with anxiety and depression and trauma.
Well, in my early teens, I experienced heavy cyberbullying, and that very much impacted how I engaged with social media. And I guess that also led then when I came back to social media, I wanted to do something positive on it because it can be so tough and so negative constantly. But I I don't know, in late teens, like I was a very happy kid and very confident in late teens. My family has bipolar disorder, and so that sensitive gene is genetic. And so when you are exposed to different environments that are challenging, you're more likely to develop a mental health disorder. And so anxiety and depression kind of became as a result of trauma, as a result of, basic life experiences. And the past 5 years I've been battling with that, and it has been incredibly difficult. But I have also been surrounded by an incredible community, an incredible family and friends that have been supportive beyond measure.
How incredible that you, especially you talked about the roots of some of your challenges with anxiety was being exposed to cyberbullying, and then on from there having some different challenges as well, but that you would go back to online to sort of support this positive message and to be a support to others and to raise the awareness. How important is it to have awareness of mental health specifically within Hutterite communities like yours?
Well, I think, first of all, I believe that we can only raise each other up when we, and better our culture and us, when we acknowledge the harms and the dangers of what we have. I think the Hutterite colony or culture is set up to support people who struggle with mental health. We have a work, a social, and religious structure that is incredibly supportive and reassuring. It's a support system we can all avail to. It's from care to multi-generational contact every day. I think it is set up to be supportive. But because of that lack of awareness, when we talk about it, there's almost always a shame stigma attached, and then it's kind of not talked about. And when you don't talk about something, or when you do, it's sort of in a negative light, people, and young people especially, what they're going to take away from comments and from conversations is, this is bad, this is a weakness, I need to hide it. And my account has been to try to show there is so much strength in vulnerability. And mental health, there are resources. It can be helped. God gave us incredible tools and incredible minds to help other people. He gave us people in our lives who want to listen. And I think that part is important for Hutterites now to kind of, as we move away from this stigma, because we are 100% moving away. There is so much progress that I see every day, and it's incredible. But I think that seeing that strength and vulnerability, that's what's going to shift next, and then it will make mental health even more an open topic.
How much progress are we making? I did stories on some of the first mental health resources to be set up in some parts of southeastern Manitoba when I was a reporter there, and that was like 25 years ago. But part of sort of the stigma there would come around people talking about it as, if you're talking about your mental health, you're complaining, or that you should, pray it away, so to speak, and such. Are some of those stigmas still pervasive today? Are you still fighting some of those, or are people still fighting some of those stigmas?
I think for sure, and that is simply as a lack of awareness. Like, they aren't aware of what it means to struggle with mental health. Mental health is not a demon. It is something that can be helped. And I think for me, what I've learned is I have to understand that everybody is on their journey. Not everyone is where I'm at, and I've been where they are at in terms of understanding and having, having an understanding when it comes to mental health. In my family, there are a lot of mental health struggles, so I have been exposed to it more than maybe some people, and then that will affect my awareness and understanding. And I think that, I know I need to give people grace who aren't there yet, who don't understand why it's important to talk about mental health and why it's important to talk about what you struggle, because we all struggle with the same stuff. So I think the resources are out there. I think that we just need to talk about it. We just need to bring it into the light.
You want to go on to do this work. I understand you want to go to university to become a therapist. Tell me, we can hear how strongly you believe in all of this, but tell me a little bit about more what you're hoping to do, because I understand it might even involve specializing in communicating this to communities that otherwise might have, might come from a traditional belief background system.
I think that everybody struggles with mental health, and For example, what I've seen is there was a school who a child died in an accident, and throughout that day, mental health counselors came to that colony, and the colony afterwards spoke of the incredible support they received, how grateful they were about that support. And that makes me think, now imagine if I could do that. Without the language barrier, without the cultural barriers, therapists are trained to approach any situation. I'm sure the people in the colony were in good hands. But for a little kid, I think it would be incredible if I could show up and if I could help and if I could make a difference and just sit with these people of my culture and I'm of their culture and listen to them. I think that would be something that I would love to do. I want to work with schools and with nonprofits, people who can't afford therapy, and just do speeches, talk about it, just talk about mental health. My late grandmother, she kind of always said, never stop asking, never stop talking about it. No matter if this person doesn't listen, go to the next person. Don't ever stop. Because once you stop, your brain starts to tell you stuff that isn't true, and it is incredibly hard to figure out what's true and what's not then. And so I want more awareness. I want to talk about it, and I don't know at this point what that would look like if I did become a professional therapist and how it would I would integrate it into the Hutt Right Society. It's never been done. I don't know, but it is absolutely my dream, and I think I would be good at it because I have a lived experience.
I'm pretty sure you'd be good at it too. You're such an inspiration, really wise beyond your years, Kaylee. Thank you very much for being on CBC with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
An important conversation with Kaylee Mandel, who lives in a Hutterite colony in rural Portage La Prairie. Her Instagram account, where she talks all about mental health, is called Tearing Down Expectations. You can find it at Tearing Down Expectations on Insta. Listening to a little bit of Sheena LeGrand, and this is acting as a bit of a teaser to maybe get you out to an upcoming show at the West End Cultural Centre in Winnipeg on May 10th, so right around the corner on the weekend. So Sheena LeGrand is, of course, pop singer-songwriter from Treherne, Manitoba, and this is a brand new track from her. So her show coming up in Winnipeg on May 10th at the West End. It is 11 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. It's mainly sunny, and it's time for morning sports. Good morning, Scott Regehr.
Good morning, Marcy.
So I am tired from staying up to watch most of what was kind of a game that I think the coach said felt like regular season. I kind of agree with the Jets last night.
Yeah, a little lackluster, especially off the top. I mean, I think most Jets fans were expecting some kind of emotional hangover after all the drama of that double OT Game 7 against the Blues. But yeah, I mean, Winnipeg was outshot 9-0. By Dallas last night in the first, 7 minutes of the game, and really was just playing catch-up throughout the night. And when you have Mikko Rantanen on the other team. That's
my
not a good
gosh.
play. Yeah, he scored all of their goals. It's the second time Rantanen's had a hat trick in a row. In their first round series, he had 3 goals, and we haven't seen that back-to-back playoff hat tricks since Jari Kurri, another Finnish winger, was around. So Scott Arniel, the coach of the Jets, was asked how Rantanen was able to have so much success last night.
He went to the net. He's a big man that got there with his stick, and whenever we face elite players, you got to know where they are. And obviously, he's feeling it, coming off of Game 7, and you got to know when he's on the ice. He's a guy that you have to make sure that you especially tie up that stick of his.
Yeah, Arniel says he was actually happy with the way the Jets defended Rantanen despite the hat trick, and it's only when he was double shifted by the Stars that he had as much success as he did. So it'll be Adam Lowry's job, lucky him, to check Rantanen coming up on Friday night when the Jets try to get back in this thing. And by the way, great to see Mark Scheifele back.
Yes.
And scoring a goal to boot. Now we just got to get Josh Morrissey back into the fold, and we'll see whether the defender is ready to go on Friday.
I just got to share this super quick because we get a handover note, right, of all the things that developed overnight, and we carry into the morning. And in the handover night last night, it simply said, Jets lose to the Dallas Rantanens.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah.
Let's hope that doesn't happen again. Okay, Toronto is also off to a good start in the PWHL playoffs.
Yeah. The Leafs failed to mention that they did win their game against Florida.
Yeah,
they have a 2-0 lead, But the Scepters, they got a couple of goals from Julia Gosling last night. They topped Minnesota, the defending champions. So step one taken and trying to dethrone them. Meanwhile, Montreal and Ottawa, Marcy, begin their series tonight. Here's charge forward Brianne Jenner.
Knowing who we're playing, I think both fan bases are going to really get up for these games. I think you're going to see some fans probably making the trek to the opposing arena. I think it's going to be really cool for Canadian hockey fans across the country to tune into this. It's nice to see on the men's side there's a lot of Canadian teams left, and obviously in our league, each Canadian team did well to make it into the postseason.
3 Canadian teams involved in both the NHL and the PWHL playoffs right now.
And on the front page of the Winnipeg Free Press this morning, a big picture of Zach Collaros.
Mm-hmm.
For people that missed this, what's he doing there? What happened here?
Yeah, well, he has been suspended for failure to respond for an off-season drug test. According to the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, Marcy, their personnel attempted to contact Collaros twice by phone, once by text, and then again by email, but he failed to respond within the required 24-hour period. Now, usually this would result in a 2-game suspension, but after considering extenuating circumstances, the league has reduced it to just 1 game. Collaros, who of course has won multiple Most Outstanding Player awards and multiple Grey Cups, he's accepted the punishment, but he says he is not happy at all with the optics.
The acknowledgement of a flawed method of getting in contact, and then they're going to go and change it. That doesn't sit right with me. The last 2 months have been very frustrating. Loving the game of football and all it's given me to be even associated with a suspension like this. There's a lot of kids that looked up to me when I was back home and in college and here as well. You don't want people, especially children, to think that you do it the wrong way. So that was the hard part for me to swallow about the whole thing.
Zach's never tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug out of the league and Players Union's joint policy, Marcy. Moving forward, the CFL and CFLPA have agreed to, quote-unquote, enhance contact protocols for off-season drug testing of players. So Collaros will miss Winnipeg's home game against BC coming up on June 12th.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Stay with us. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's 13 degrees. We're headed to a high of 26, but it is the wind you're going to notice. By noon today, it'll be south 50, gusting to 70. Sunny today, and then there is a chance of overnight showers. Total crime decreased in downtown Winnipeg last year, but a local business owner says it doesn't feel like it. Kushnan Zalawadia at Downtown Family Foods says shoplifting is a big problem. Retail theft increased across the city by 41%. Police say more enforcement is a big reason for that bigger number. Zalawadia understands police are busy and would like to see more boots on the ground.
Maybe if they can send someone, it should be very quick.
more patrollings for this shoplifting things.
Zalawadia has cameras, but worries reporting thefts at his store takes up too much time. You can hear more on this story coming up in the next half hour right here on Information Radio. A Winnipegger whose driver's license was suspended during a crackdown on cannabis-impaired driving says police are using flawed tests. Sean Vipond was stopped after he went into a dispensary. He says police swabbed his mouth for traces of cannabis and he tested positive, even though he says 20 hours had passed since he had consumed the drug.
If you consume regularly, you simply will not pass that test, no matter how careful you are being to follow the law and to follow, what is right, which is to not drive while you're high. You can still get flagged and get suspended.
Experts say while oral fluid tests can detect cannabis in the system, they aren't an accurate way to assess level of intoxication. Winnipeg police say their drug testing equipment is approved by the Criminal Code. Manitoba parents are being urged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Manitoba public health officials say low immunization rates in the Southern Health region have contributed to a spike in cases in the Winkler area. Cases have also been reported in the Dugald area. Ruth Grimes is a pediatrician and assistant professor at the University of Manitoba.
It does sadden me that we've come to this point. Because that means that somewhere along the line, for whatever reason, confidence in vaccine programs and confidence in vaccines has dropped.
Grimes calls measles a devastating infection, adding making sure immunizations are up to date is the best way to prevent sickness and further spread. Premier Wab Kinew has written to the Prime Minister pitching a federal-provincial partnership on several nation-building projects. They include creating a trade corridor through the Port of Churchill, establishing Indigenous fair trade zones, and developing critical minerals infrastructure. Kinew says Manitoba is ready to collaborate with other provinces.
There's been so much talk about connecting resources in Western Canada to Tidewater and Hudson Bay. I think now's the time for us to go out into the market, the private sector, and see if that's something real, if that's something that the business community can make happen with financing.
Kinew says if Manitoba can bring Indigenous partners to the table, it can unlock economic activity here. His letter to the Prime Minister also calls for the completion of the twinning of the Trans-Canada Highway in Manitoba. Now to the escalating military action between India and Pakistan.
India has undertaken yet another blatant military act of aggression against Pakistan.
Pakistan's military spokesperson, it is the second straight day India has targeted Pakistan with multiple drone and missile strikes. Indian officials now confirm it is targeting Pakistani air defenses. India's foreign minister warns Pakistan not to retaliate, saying any military attacks will be met with an immediate response. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says fan support is the lifeblood of any hockey team, and Winnipeg, he says, has plenty of it. Bettman was in Winnipeg ahead of the Jets' Game 1 showdown against the Dallas Stars yesterday. He says although there was a decline in ticket sales last season, he didn't think it would be a big issue for the franchise.
I've never worried about Winnipeg long term. You have moments like Sunday night. That's going to be in people's minds for a long, long time, and a connection to the club and to hockey. The Jets brings people of Winnipeg together. It's part of the community. It's part of the quality of life here, and I think people recognize that.
Bettman says Jets fan support inside and outside the arena is the reason Winnipeg is an important part of the league. Well, did it look like playoff hockey? Mark Scheifele in the second period on Sportsnet, scoring on his first game back after injury. Still, the Jets lose Game 1 against the Dallas Stars 3-2. Head coach Scott Arniel says his team did not play like they were in the playoffs, describing, in fact, their play as sloppy and not crisp.
We just gave up home ice advantage. And it wasn't a game that they rolled over top of us for 3 periods. That was a game where we weren't at our best, and we should have been here, especially starting again another series at home and trying to get the upper hand by getting Game 1.
The Jets now trail Dallas 1-0. Game 2, also in Winnipeg, goes tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I always find it stressful as a Jets playoff fan to sort of watch the team have a really hard-fought first series and then lose that first game because, if we look back at our history.
So much exhilaration. They must have just been so pumped after winning against the Blues on Sunday night, and then maybe they were just...
I don't know. It was never going to match it. I have to say, though, like the coach is alluding to it there a little bit, like it's not that they played bad, but, poorly last night. It just was lacking that
spark.
Mm-hmm. Good word. All right, we got tomorrow night. We'll see, as you said. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on our News Center Live. It's time for our regional forecast on CBC. With it, Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. Sunny and warm across the province. We're looking at a mix of sun, cloudy conditions as you move from the south into the north, and a few showers and even thunderstorm in certain areas later today. For Winnipeg and the rest of the Red River Valley region at this point, we are starting the day with sunshine. Current temperature sits around 13 degrees. The high will get to 26 today. The winds will be picking up from the south around the noon period. It gets really windy at that point. And tonight we'll see some clouds roll in. For the Pembina Valley region, Morden, Winkler, Altoona, Morris, all the way down to the U.S. border, we're seeing similar conditions at this time. Sunny with temperatures around 10 degrees, 11 degrees, expecting a high of 28. Breezy south winds through the day. For the western part of the province, Brandon is sunny and clear at this time. Current temperature 6 degrees, expecting a high of 27. Also going to get windy at some point from the south. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is sitting at 17 at this time. Temperatures warm up to 30 degrees later today. A mix of sun and clouds in the forecast. Showers and thunderstorm also expected sometime this afternoon. In the Interlake region, Gimli is sitting at 10 degrees at this point. Sunny skies we see in that part of the province. Today, expect sunny conditions, light breeze from the south, becoming windy as you get towards the noon period. High will be around 22, 23. The powerful influence surrounding areas tracking into the north, we're seeing temperatures around 9 degrees, 10 degrees, and partly cloudy at this point. We still have that local smoke from wildfire causing poor air quality and reduced visibility for the region, so you need to take care. Expect a mix of sun and clouds, and you warm up to 26 degrees. In Thompson, 10 degrees and mostly cloudy conditions we have for you this time. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. Breezy conditions from the south. High will get to 22. And then tracking the conditions into the further north in Churchill, where we have temperatures around 6 degrees at this time. Mostly cloudy skies. Expect a mix of sun and clouds, also becoming cloudier in the afternoon. A slim chance of rain for folks in Churchill this morning with light winds from the south. High will only be around 8. So in summary, mostly sunny down south and cloudy up north.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, what's up?
No, not much. I know. It's.
I was going to give you a big introduction, then I'm like, I think traffic's quiet.
With a huge update. No, it's actually been very quiet commute, which is fine with me. The number 204-788-3093.
Well, up next on the show, there has been a lot of conversations about AI right now. How would you feel about a robot taking care of you in a hospital, for example, or maybe assisting you in surgery? CBC's Jim Agapito found out.
It would feel really creepy, and the robot might break down or something, and then you might be killed, and that wouldn't really end well.
And so that makes you a little nervous?
Yeah.
The first thing I thought of was those self-driving cars, and I would never drive in one of those. So I guess looking at that way might be a little bit scary, but I'm looking at the health perspective and just helping the medical team.
Surprisingly, that's not the first time I'm hearing it, actually. I've heard it before, but yeah, I mean, I would feel a little safer in the hands of a robot where I know it can't go wrong. But when it does... I am a surgeon myself, so yeah.
Now, all kidding aside, there are, of course, benefits for doctors using a robot during surgery. Manitoba unveiled its first $3.6 million intuitive surgical Da Vinci robot, and it's changing the way that operations are done in our province. CBC's Jim Agapito, who was there speaking with people, also recently spoke to surgeons at Health Sciences Centre about the new technology.
This is Mona. She's Manitoba's first ever Da Vinci surgery robot. Mona helps surgeons perform minimally invasive surgeries on patients like you can see from these hospitals across Canada. She's been at the Health Science Centre since last September and is named after Leonardo da Vinci's most famous painting, the Mona Lisa.
A lot of patients are excited about it. It's brand new technology to Manitoba, and it is on the cutting edge of surgical care.
That's Dr. Jilly Akhtar-Dinesh, a thoracic surgeon at HSC. She uses Mona to perform many operations daily, like the one she's performing here. They are surgeries that happen in the chest and involve organs such as the lungs, heart, and trachea.
Some patients have asked if the robot is doing the operation or if the surgeon is. The surgeon is still very much in charge of the operation. It is robot assisted.
Mona is made of 3 different parts. The surgeon sits and looks down on a vision cart, which acts as the magnified eyes of the surgeon. They use their hands to control the central console, which operates the patient's side cart. That cart has 4 robotic arms that acts like the surgeon's hands and arms. It's responsible for performing all the various surgical tasks, from holding instruments like scalpels or scissors to performing incisions. So it's almost like the surgeon is playing a video game through virtual reality.
For any robotic operation, we need 4 small incisions. They're about 8 millimeters each, and that's what their robotic arms attach to. So the surgeon at the beginning of the operation scrubs in his bedside, makes those small incisions, inserts the robotic arms, and then the surgeon goes and sits on the robotic console, which is often on the other side of the operating room, and through that console is able to control all of the robot's arms and perform the operation. We've also found it to be beneficial to patients because they have less pain, they have expedited recoveries, they spend less time in hospital, and they've been able to return to their normal life a lot quicker, which is ultimately all that matters.
Al Simons knows this best. After having a biopsy last year, he was diagnosed with early prostate cancer and required surgery. Doctors used Mona to operate on him last December. Simon says if it wasn't for Mona, his recovery would be much longer.
After about 2 weeks, got the catheter out of there, and I'm like, well, feeling pretty good now. I'm ready to go back to the gym here and stuff. But you got to wait your 6-week period because I don't want to mess anything up. That's after going through all of that. I've talked to people that have had the old method done. One guy I know had a permanent catheter the rest of his life. I've heard of people incontinent the rest of their lives and nerve damage and stuff with the old method, But I'm sure there's a lot of success stories too with the original method, but my continence just snapped back like that. I was, within a month, I was pretty much 100%.
And that's making huge progress on addressing some of our medical backlogs our province is facing, says surgical lead for Shared Health, Dr. Edward Bushell. He says if they can send a patient home after 1 day, it opens beds for other people in need.
300 bed days is an entire bed in our system bought back. The robot's buying back numerous beds per day that become available for other people, our emergency room patients that come in because they've been in a significant trauma and they need our care. And we don't have the beds and they wait in the emergency room and it backs up our emergency rooms. So the robot, by decreasing the use of our inpatient beds, allows other people that need those beds to go into them sooner. Most importantly, we train our people on the robot. They like that. They want to stay. They come back. I have more surgeons.
And if Mona can also help address the doctor shortage, officials say that could be a win-win situation for health in our province. Jim Agapito, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Thanks to Jim for that report.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Well, sometimes you have a guest in the program and you need to give them a little more time for the conversation. And that's what we're going to do after 8 o'clock. We have a full feature interview. It's going to take most of the half hour because world-renowned vaccine scientist Dr. Peter Hotez is in Winnipeg. I spoke with him at length yesterday, and we're going to hear that interview about why there's been a growing wave of mistrust in medical science.
The claims are made that it was the scientists who screwed up or the public health experts who screwed up and gave the wrong messages. And I push back on that and say, not really. I mean, the message will always be imperfect in a pandemic, but the information wasn't that bad. What you had, though, was the people coming out of the far right with the health and wellness movement that was actively seeking to discredit the science and the scientists and the public health professionals, trying to portray them as cartoon villains or public enemies. And ultimately, that's what really did the damage.
We're going to hear what Dr. Hotez says he'd like to see done to restore trust in the medical establishment and why he says that might be an uphill battle. He thinks that mistrust in science is, quote, a new normal in many ways. Dr. Hotez was on Time Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in global health in 2024 for his work on vaccines. And you might also recall he was in headlines a lot for many different reasons. Beyond his work, Joe Rogan and his podcast challenged Dr. Hotez to a debate around vaccines. Dr. Hotez declined that invitation. He talks a bit about that as well in our interview. So stay tuned. That's coming up after 8 o'clock right here on CBC. You're listening to Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or you might be watching on YouTube this morning. We continue to share how bright it is down south here. It is cloudy up north, but Winnipeg 13 right now. And winds are south at 44. The winds are going to be the story of the day today in Winnipeg. High of 26, so hot again, but winds will be 30 gusting to 50. They might even gust to 70 around noontime for your lunch hour. And if you're in Brandon, sunny and a nice 6 degrees today. You're also going to be windy with a high of 27 today. And Abby was just mentioning in our regional forecast that cloud cover up north. So Thompson is mainly cloudy. It's 10 degrees right now. You will have a mix of sun and cloud today, but your high is going to be right around 21 degrees. Well, let's dig into these numbers we've been hearing in the news this morning and the analysis of the report that came out yesterday. According to these new numbers from the Winnipeg Police Service, violent crime and property crime are down in the city of Winnipeg. The police sharing that in their 2024 annual report. They say there are some promising trends here. While the numbers show a decrease in serious crimes, such as incidents involving knives, other crimes like cybercrime, however, and shoplifting are trending higher in this report. For context, police investigated just over 8,500 shoplifting incidents in 2024, compared to 6,047 in 2023. If you're not quick at math, then let this stay with you. That's an increase year over year of 41%. So that number backs up anecdotally what we've been hearing about shoplifting all over town here, right? In a lot of corners of Winnipeg. For Winnipeg grocer Kishan Salawadia, it doesn't come as any surprise. He says that theft happens in his store all the time. Here's a bit of what he said to CBC's Josh Crabb.
Maybe a crime of maybe a murder is down, but as an owner of a grocery store, I will say shoplifting and all those things are not yet down. I will say it even hiked up.
How big of a problem is it?
It is a very big problem to us, especially stealing food. Trust me, it is a very big one. Every day we kind of face a scenario of chicken being stolen up, cheese being stolen up, anything that is expensive, even like right behind you there is a deli department. People are gonna come, fill their pockets, run out. It is a big impact because now I don't know how to just take care of those costs. From whose pocket? Is that from my pocket? If that from the customer pocket? From whose pocket? Right? Anyway, we're gonna lose the thing from that. It's not under the control, and it is a big impact to the local people as well. Anytime we report this incident to the cops, the only thing we get to hear is about we are always under the hold on a line for half hour. I don't mean hold means nobody's speaking to us, but according to us, that's an unwanted chat that time. A representative answers, they're gonna transfer it to the different line and all those things. That's not needed at that time. Especially literally 30 minutes we have wasted on that. So our employee is always stuck on that if we do that. So that employee is not even able to serve the customer, neither they can stop the crime, neither it's a waste of a time for them.
How often is it happening?
Every day.
How many times a day?
you can say like 2 to 3 times for sure. If you stay here for 5 hours, you're going to see that too.
So that was Downtown Family Foods owner Kishan Zalawadia speaking with the CBC's Josh Crabb. Now, to get a better sense of what this report says, this crime report, we have Deputy Chief Cam McKidd with the Winnipeg Police Service on with us live. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
Thanks for being with us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
You just heard, Kishan's story. When speaking with retailers, how often are you hearing this, similar stories?
We hear it fairly regularly, and we see it. We're citizens of Winnipeg as well, so we see it when we're out in the public. A lot of officers are making off-duty arrests when they see these things happen in different retail outlets. I sympathize with the guest I just heard speaking. Very frustrating when you're trying to operate a business and you have tight profit margins, and a lot of it's walking out the door. It must be a very helpless feeling. So we feel the pain of our business community, and we've been working really, really hard to give them whatever assistance we can through enforcement.
Help us understand how that enforcement could shift and change. I mean, obviously you're under a ton of pressure with this 41% increase year over year. But, when you hear, people, in some cases, we talk to retailers who say they stop picking up the phone because they just don't believe that a response is going to come there. Will this report prompt a shift in policing to try to figure out what might be an effective response, more effective response, given the resources that you have?
Yeah, excellent question. I can tell you that the shift has already occurred. In 2024, we did a great deal of work both internally with our on-duty resources, but in particular, there's a lot of government funding with respect to the violent retail theft and crime initiative. We ended up over a 7-month period. We made 981 arrests in 2024. And it wasn't just enforcement and arresting. It was visible presence in retail locations. We're data-driven, and we were trying to determine where crime was happening, and we were flooding those areas with resources. And what you saw in a lot of those areas, like, for instance, in the Roslyn area, the Outlet Mall, there were certain areas where it was vastly underreported. So we flooded those areas with enforcement, with covert enforcement, making arrests and a visible presence. And there was also an education piece to that where we were meeting with the retailers on a regular basis, encouraging them to report these crimes to us, so we would have the appropriate data to lead our enforcement initiatives. So that those things combined resulted in a lot of reporting that wasn't being reported previously. It resulted in a lot of arrests being made that wouldn't have been made if we didn't have those additional resources that were provided through the funding. And that certainly contributed in a large part to that spike in shoplifting that you see.
I can see in the report that there is a change in terms of the shoplifting that would have happened sort of around COVID. We were talking about more liquor stores, or that's what was happening, and more violence. So this is a change. Last year there was a significant spike in shoplifting under $5,000. What do you think is driving that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was speaking to. I can tell you that in the West District, for instance, a large spike in shoplifting being reported there. Inspector Max Waddell has done a fantastic job liaising with the business community in West District. He's held a number of community forums. I think there's over 300 businesses have attended these forums. And part of that's been an education piece with respect to the need to report these crimes so we can deploy our resources appropriately. So that's resulted in, and as I said, it's resulted in a spike in shoplifting, but it's not necessarily due to a rising crime trend. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to suggest that there isn't an issue out there with shoplifting. We see it, as I said, we see it all the time. But this engagement with the business community has better enabled us to sort of get a grasp on where these crimes are happening. And the result of that is the spike you see in numbers. So again, not necessarily indicative of a rising crime trend, but more of we're really encouraging reporting. We're doing proactive work in a number of avenues to detect these crimes and make arrests.
I want to ask you, I want to save time for shoplifting for a minute, but I want to say just a brief moment longer on the biggest thing, which is I want to ask about cybercrime in a minute, but I want to ask about shoplifting still for one more thing. Some people will talk about, we had a West End business owner on, they had a big forum about crime earlier this week, as you know, in the West End. And he was saying, some of the people in there he tries to work with and talk to, and he can feel that they're desperate and they actually are just stealing because they need food. But then in other cases, he sees there's more organized crime.
Right.
How are you targeting your response given that? Like, what do you understand about who is stealing?
Yeah, I think I heard that interview. Both of those things are correct. There's different levels of retail theft. There are instances where people are stealing food because they don't have the money to buy food. We do not see very much of that, to be honest. That's a very small percentage of what we're seeing out there. And I spoke yesterday to this. If we come across a situation like this that's genuine, the last thing we're going to do is steer that person into the criminal justice system. There's a lot of off-ramps for people who are struggling, and we're connected with a lot of partners in the community that can provide help to people that are in that sort of situation. There's certainly at the other end, there's certainly organized retail theft that we do see more and more, and we've reported on those in the media with some really significant arrests we've made. We have a dedicated property crimes unit that looks into the higher level organized retail theft, and they've had some spectacular arrests over the past year in 2024. And in between that, you've got the crimes of opportunity, which is the majority of what we see when we're making these arrests. It's people who are making risk-reward calculations as to, if I were to steal this, it's expensive. What's going to happen if I get caught? They're making these calculations. A lot of them are electing to steal property. And those are the ones, that's the bulk of what we see, to be honest. So that can be very frustrating for store owners, for sure.
This is a big report, Deputy Chief. Thank you for walking through part of it with us this morning. And if you could stay in the line just for a moment, Corey just has an additional off-air question for you. But thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Thank you. That's live. Cam McKidd with us, Deputy Chief with the Winnipeg Police Service. Here's Heather Wells with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba parents are being encouraged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Ruth Grimes at the University of Manitoba is fielding more questions, she says, from parents concerned about their kids and that their vaccines are up to date. The Winnipeg Jets lose game one of their series against the Dallas Stars.
We just gave up home ice advantage.
Head coach Scott Arniel, as the Jets fall to the Stars 3-2. Arniel says his team didn't play like it was playoff hockey. The Jets now trail going into Game 2 tomorrow night right here in Winnipeg. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thanks very much, Heather. It is 13 degrees right now in Winnipeg. It's mainly sunny. Winds are south at 44 at the airport, and they're going to be gusty through this afternoon. Winds will be gusting 50 up to 70 kilometers per hour. Well, the Deputy Chief actually is going to stay on with us. We're just going to tape something here at 8 o'clock. We will bring that to you on the airwaves either this afternoon or on tomorrow's show. Just because it's such a big report, there's no reason to rush this. And so we're really grateful that he's able to give us a bit more time, because one of the other things in this report had to do with cybercrime, and there being challenges. The number of cybercrimes has more than tripled since 2018, so obviously a big concern for people. So we'll get you more on that. Also, coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, with measles spreading throughout North America, vaccines are top of mind again, but misinformation and growing anti-vaccine sentiments continue to grow too. Dr. Peter Hotez is going to be our special guest. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
What happens when you experience the unthinkable? The songwriter Nick Cave had dedicated himself to his craft when, in a short amount of time, he lost 2 of his sons. Nick Cave will be here to tell you how that changed his outlook on work, on life, and God.
It took a long time for me to fundamentally connect to people.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The internet is frustrating. It's full of ads, sponsored content, artificial intelligence, and trolls. In a new podcast, the tech journalist Cory Doctorow asks who broke the internet and how we can get back to the days when it was good. Cory Doctorow, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The U.S. and U.K. are expected to announce a major trade deal today. President Donald Trump has been posting obscure messages on social media, but this morning, officials in London have confirmed an agreement has in fact been reached. This makes the U.K. the first country to cut a deal since Trump announced his global tariffs last month. Nick Harper is following developments from Washington. And Nick, what do we know about the deal so far?
Well, Marcia, the UK has wanted a trade deal with the US ever since Brexit, when it withdrew from the European Union back in 2020. But of course, Donald Trump's tariffs have sped up the process. President Trump has posted this morning on social media a couple of times. He's written that this should be a very big and exciting day for the US and UK. He's calling it a full and comprehensive deal, which will cement the relationship, he says, for many years to come. However, the details are a little thin, but we do know what both sides want. The UK wants to remove the 25% tariff on UK steel and the 25% tariff on UK cars entering the US. Washington, in return, wants a deal on pharmaceuticals and technology, in particular for the UK to remove the digital services tax that UK tech companies have to pay.
Donald Trump's post last night suggested more deals were in the works. What other countries are close to agreements with the U.S.?
Yeah, the White House is saying that talks are underway with 16 other trading partners. The most advanced of those talks seem to be with Japan and South Korea. They've both had trade delegations in the US over the last few weeks. Also, India, the US Vice President was there a couple of weeks ago. And this weekend, talks are finally getting underway between the US and China. The US, though, is downplaying expectations of a quick deal with Beijing. They're saying that these initial talks are more about trying to de-escalate before both sides can move forward. Marcia?
Thank you so much, Nick.
You're welcome.
Reporter Nick Harper in Washington. For the second night in a row, there has been more military posturing between India and Pakistan, and tensions between the nuclear powers are soaring. Across both countries, flights have been diverted, airports have been closed, and in disputed Kashmir, more people are preparing for the worst and taking shelter. Our South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji has the story.
The day after India launched a string of missile strikes into neighboring Pakistan, tensions are high in the capital of Indian-administered Kashmir, the divided region that both India and Pakistan claim in full. Islamabad is accusing India of a second military action and of trying to provoke Pakistan using drones. Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chowdhury speaks for the Pakistan Armed Forces.
India has undertaken yet another blatant military act of aggression against Pakistan.
India says it did target air defense systems in Pakistan, but it accused that country of attempting its own drone attacks. And New Delhi says this response has been measured and justified, spurred by the militant attack last month that killed 26 men, mostly tourists. India's Foreign Affairs Minister Subramanyam Jaishankar is again saying that his country does not want the conflict to spiral.
However, if there are military attacks on us, there should be no doubt that it will be met with a very, very firm response.
Strong words of warning as heavy artillery fire is still being exchanged along the line of control, the de facto border separating Kashmir. More than a dozen people have been killed in the shelling, including a woman whose family members sit in a circle grieving. We want there to be a ceasefire fast. We're suffering, says this man, as Kashmiris wait to see if leaders of the two countries will listen to calls for de-escalation and step back from the brink of war. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
No new pope has been elected yet today. The crowd in St. Peter's Square reacts to the latest result of the papal conclave. Black smoke rises from the Sistine Chapel chimney, meaning the cardinals do not have a decision on Pope Francis's successor. They held their second and third rounds of balloting this morning. The cardinals are now on a break, but there will be a fourth and, if needed, a fifth vote later today. Some Vatican watchers say it could take a few more days until one of the cardinals achieves the needed two-thirds support. Lithuania's parliament has voted in favor of withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention. It is an international treaty banning the use of anti-personnel landmines. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and Finland are the 5 NATO countries that border Russia. They all say they need to exit the agreement. They say they need to be able to respond to the military threats from their much larger neighbor. The UK is commemorating VE Day with a service of national remembrance and thanksgiving. That is some of the sound from Westminster Abbey. The White Cliffs of Dover was a popular Second World War song. Victory in Europe Day celebrates the formal acceptance by allies of Nazi Germany's unconditional surrender. Many members of the royal family, including the King and Queen, are present for today's service. Also taking part was the great-great-grandson of wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill. 10-year-old Alexander Churchill recited a prayer.
Let us pray for peace in Europe and across the world, in our time and for generations to come.
This year marks 80 years since the end of the war in 1945. A grieving mother in the UK is urging parents here in Canada to take the threat from measles seriously. The number of cases continues to grow in Ontario and Alberta. And as Jennifer Yoon tells us, the disease can be devastating.
Our family's been through hell.
A parent's nightmare. Helplessly watching your child dying in a hospital bed because of a measles infection. Rebecca Archer says she didn't realize just how serious the virus can be.
The fact that it was measles, I just couldn't get my head around it.
10-year-old Renee was infected as an infant, too little to be vaccinated, during an outbreak in Manchester, UK back in 2013. She seemed to recover, but the measles virus stayed dormant in her brain for years. When it finally attacked her nervous system, she had seizures, couldn't talk, eat, even stay conscious.
Yeah, they told me that it was going to be fatal and she'd have no brain activity.
Renee had a rare complication of measles called subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. Infectious disease specialist Michelle Barton worries a child in Canada will die of that or of any other complications like pneumonia, as measles rips through unvaccinated children in parts of Ontario and Alberta, putting those who are immunocompromised or too young for the jab at risk.
We wouldn't normally think about it in a developed world setting where measles had been eradicated.
Rebecca is begging parents to get vaccinated. She says her child would still be alive if others were immunized against measles.
That injection could save your child's life, like it could have with my child.
She's hoping others understand the stakes. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
A game that's popular with high school students has police in Canada warning it's dangerous. Senior Assassin involves tracking down players and shooting them with water, gel, or foam dart guns. Police say the fun becomes unsafe when the toys are mistaken for real guns. Idil Musa has more.
It's supposed to be all fun and games. Teens ambushing their classmates in malls, parks, and restaurants with toy guns. But police across the country in cities from Winnipeg to Sudbury are warning.
Replica firearms look an awful lot like real firearms.
Constable James Dixon is with York Regional Police just north of Toronto. The service has recently received numerous reports of young people carrying what appear to be guns. And Dixon says that kind of misunderstanding can lead to serious trouble.
Whether it's a police-involved shooting, whether there's criminal charges of either assault with a weapon, whether there's mischief to property. There's a lot of different things that can come out of here that we're very concerned about.
Last year in Kansas, a teen was paralyzed when the father of a target shot him. In February, an 18-year-old in Florida was shot by an off-duty police officer who mistook his water gun for a real one in the dark.
Across the country, there have been tragedies and near tragedies that have occurred.
Florida State Attorney Melissa Nelson told reporters earlier this year the game has also led to traffic collisions and school evacuations.
It might seem like a game, and certainly it seems fun to young kids, but the consequences could be deadly.
Police are urging teens to make sure their toy guns look nothing like the real thing, or better yet, forgo the game altogether. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news for World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio on CBC. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and YouTube on a sunny Thursday. It's going to be really similar weather-wise to yesterday. Abby's going to tell us about that in a moment, but lots of sunshine. It's 13 degrees right now. And you just heard on World Report some stories about measles that continues to spread throughout the country, including here in Manitoba. Well, this half hour on the program, we have a feature interview. With measles spreading, vaccines are once again top of mind, but misinformation and growing anti-vaccine sentiment continues to grow as well. Dr. Peter Hotez will be our guest for a feature interview. I spoke with him yesterday. We're going to play all of our conversation for you. He made Time Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in global health in 2024, largely for his work on vaccines. So stay tuned. He says mistrust in science is a, quote, new normal. Right now, let's get headlines from Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, total crime decreased in downtown Winnipeg last year, but a local business owner says it doesn't feel like it. Kishan Zalawadia at Downtown Family Foods says shoplifting is a big problem. Retail theft increased across the city by 41% compared to 2023, and police say more enforcement is a big reason for that bigger number. And a Winnipegger whose license was suspended during a crackdown on cannabis-impaired driving says police are using flawed tests. We'll hear about that as well coming up in our next news at 8:30.
Abby?
Warm and sunny start down south, cloudy up north, smoky conditions in Flin-Flon, the pass surrounding areas. Winnipeg at this point, we are at 13, warming up to 26.
And Corey, the commute?
Very quiet commute so far this morning, but if you see something going on, let me know about it. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as measles does continue to spread in the country, including in Manitoba, as I've mentioned, doctors continue to urge parents to consider vaccinating their children, or rather, to vaccinate their children. But my next guest says that misinformation and the rise in anti-science rhetoric are, quote, the new normal. Dr. Peter Hotez is an American pediatrician and virologist and world-renowned infectious disease and vaccine researcher. He is in Winnipeg for a series of talks at the U of M, University of Manitoba. Dr. Hotez was on Time Magazine's list of 100 most influential people in global health in 2024. He was co-nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on the team that developed a low-cost, patent-free COVID-19 vaccine. And you might also know him as the doctor that Joe Rogan challenged to come on his podcast and defend and debate the science of vaccines, an offer that he declined. I spoke with Dr. Peter Hotez yesterday.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So how big would you say the anti-science movement is right now? How do you describe this?
Well, certainly in the United States, and unfortunately moving into Canada to some extent, it's become quite a significant anti-public health force. You know, in the U.S., especially where I am in Texas, we've had a lot of people needlessly lose their lives because they refuse COVID vaccines. So, you know, if you look, for instance, at the population of Texas, which is similar to the size of Canada, you know, roughly 30 million plus, in Texas, we lost 100,000 people to COVID. In Texas, it was exactly half that, 50,000 deaths in Canada because of, in Texas, so much vaccine refusal. So of the 100,000 deaths in Texas, almost half did not have to happen, but they were 50,000 needless deaths because people in Texas refused COVID vaccines. And that's how dangerous this movement is. They were targeted not through what's sometimes called misinformation or infodemic, implying it was just random junk out there on the internet, but it was a targeted and deliberate movement. And now in the U.S., especially where I am in Texas, is starting to spill over into childhood immunizations. And we're seeing now a very large measles epidemic in the same places where people needlessly died because they refused COVID vaccines. So a spillover to childhood immunizations.
I wonder, from your, obviously, your wealth of knowledge, I would love your perspective on this idea that, you know, how much of the movement grew because people at first didn't feel heard during COVID. They might have had vaccine hesitancy. And then they felt that they couldn't even express that. They got labeled, quote unquote, anti-vaxxers, and then maybe felt they were being told what to do instead of being provided information to make their choice. How much of this started there? And how different is that from how it's been co-opted now?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You know, what started as resistance or pushback against vaccine mandates, which you could sort of understand, unfortunately, the anti-vaccine activists wedged in there and then went the next step and falsely discredited the effectiveness and safety of vaccines. And that's where I got involved, because I'm a vaccine scientist and pediatrician, and I'm also the parent of an adult daughter with autism and had written intellectual disabilities and written a book called Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism, which came out of my long discussions with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. back in 2017. So the problem was, starting around and with the COVID pandemic was there was pushback against the mandates, and then you started to see things happen, for instance, at the CPAC Conference of Conservatives in Dallas in 2021, where it started out, first they're going to vaccinate you, and then they're going to take away your guns and your Bibles. All right, you get it. It's a bit over the top. And again, that pushback against vaccine mandates. But then what happened was they brought on all of the most toxic anti-vaccine activists to falsely discredit the effectiveness and safety of vaccines. And then this amplified was amplified by some U.S. senators and members of Congress. It was amplified nightly on Fox News during the Delta wave that falsely discredited the effectiveness and safety of vaccines. This is when you got Joe Rogan pushing ivermectin, which does nothing for COVID, and in place of getting vaccinated. And then in parallel, you started to see this merge or coalesce with the health and wellness and nutritional supplement industry that was buying up things like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine in bulk and then selling it at a big profit and pairing it with telemedicine visits. So it was really this convergence of the health freedom, libertarian ideologies with the very corrupt health and wellness and influencer industry that was making profit on it. And this is now really accelerated in the rural conservative areas of the country, West Texas, the Panhandle, going up into Oklahoma and Kansas. And to some extent, you're starting to see it in Alberta and possibly in adjoining areas of Canada and moving south. So it's coming up from the South Plains and down from the North Plains.
So having said that, you've called this the new normal, and obviously, RFK Jr. is now in charge of much of your health decision-making in the United States. But just to keep it here in Canada, what we understand about people that just frankly don't trust science anymore, how do you begin to rebuild that trust, or what do you think the next step is when you look at this from a public health point of view?
Yeah, I mean, and so I think you hit on a very important question, and now I'm going to give you a very long, I don't really know the answer to your question answer, because it is so complicated, and we're not reaching the people that we need to. I mean, part of the distrust in science and medicine, the claims are made that it was the scientists who screwed up or the public health experts who screwed up and gave the wrong messages. And I push back on that and say, not really. I mean, the message, as it will always be, imperfect in a pandemic, but the information wasn't that bad. What you had, though, was the people coming out of the far right with the health and wellness movement that was actively seeking to discredit the science and the scientists and the public health professionals, trying to portray them as cartoon villains or public enemies. And ultimately, that's what really did the damage. So the idea that people don't trust scientists coming out of the blue, no, it was due to an active movement seeking to discredit the science, the scientists, the public health, and the public health experts.
Obviously, with the province dealing with the rise in measles cases, and right now, in the moment we're speaking, it's in southern Manitoba mostly, health officials are saying that some of the recent measles cases did not have any known contact to an infected person. I'm switching gears a bit here on us, but how concerning is that?
Well, measles is one of the most highly contagious viruses we know about, maybe the most single contagious virus. So it's actually a good indication of how robust your vaccination program is, because the minute you start to see declines in childhood immunization rates below 90%, measles won't be the last one you see, but it's usually the first one that you see. So it's a good indicator that things are not going as well as you'd like. And And that's what we're seeing now in the Southern Plains in West Texas, moving up into the Panhandle in Oklahoma. And I do worry that a similar movement could be underway in Alberta and possibly neighboring Manitoba, which is one of the reasons that I'm here to see, what we can do to get out really important health information on both the safety of the MMR vaccines, which is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, one of the safest vaccines that we know about, one of the most effective vaccines that we know about, and to also debunk this idea that you can compensate for not getting vaccinated with this phony baloney cocktail of budesonide and vitamin A and clarithromycin, which is the kinds of things, tragically, our Health and Human Services Secretary has been talking about.
Is there anything that you think that a government can do to convince, for example, someone who is hesitant to vaccinate themselves and their family, without isolating or shaming someone, without forcing someone to do it, and maybe strengthening their resolve, not to do it? Like it's kind of a repeat of where do we go from here question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some things, and I've put this out in an article in the Public Library of Science on some of the simpler things that we can do. One is I've created some infographics that look at what happens if lots of children get measles, where you have 20% hospitalized, a high percentage of measles pneumonia, even death, ICU admissions, permanent neurologic damage, versus the very rare side effects of the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. And those infographics are useful because one of the tactics of the anti-vaccine activists is they tend to downplay the severity of measles or other childhood infections and to tend to exaggerate the very, very rare side effects of the MMR vaccine. So I think that's very helpful. The other is to actually debunk the specific disinformation talking points from the anti-vaccine movement. And that's very helpful for healthcare professionals also, because sometimes parents are downloading this information and the pediatrician or the family practitioner, internist or nurse practitioner says, well, gee, I never heard that before, and is made to feel like they're not keeping up with the literature. Well, they are, but they're not keeping up with the fake stuff. So, for instance, we had the Florida Surgeon General, Dr. Ladapo, who's who's an anti-vaccine activist, make public statements that the COVID mRNA vaccines are causing turbo cancer because the nucleic acid is integrating into our genome next to oncogenes. And so I would then go on the cable news channels and say, wait a minute, there's no such thing as a turbo cancer. That's a made up term. And what's more, the lipid nanoparticles that deliver mRNA and nucleic acid get past the cell membrane into the cytoplasm, but never get into the nucleus. And even if they were, we have proteins of our innate immune system that prevent the incorporation of foreign nucleic acid into our genome. Otherwise, every time we ate a hamburger, we'd have cow DNA integrating into our nucleus. And then people will get that. But, we need to have that more readily accessible for healthcare providers. And of course, it keeps switching up and changes. Just as soon as you think you've gotten on top of it, it's a bit like playing whack-a-mole or moving the goalpost. The anti-vaccine activists come up with something else. So it's that website has to be updated in real time. So I think those kinds of things are relatively straightforward to do. And it's at least a first step in trying to restore vaccine confidence.
Obviously, the rhetoric can become dangerous. You in your own life and experience have experienced aggression as a result of the rhetoric. Can you share with the listeners sort of some of the things that you've been through because of trying to stay out front of the truth of science here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the activities of the anti-vaccine activists, especially the health and wellness influencer groups, because I'm bad for business. So what they'll do is they'll try to portray me as a public enemy or a cartoon villain and put it out there on social media, either through Twitter or X or other social media platforms, or I'll get threatening emails. I'll get stalked where where it's been announced I'm giving a public lecture. And there's other dark components to it as well. As I say, sometimes I'm the trifecta. I'm a scientist, vaccine scientist and a Jewish vaccine scientist. So it gets into these ancient tropes of anti-Semitic tropes claiming that Jews start pandemics or profiting from vaccines. So unfortunately, we've had swastikas mailed to our home on a couple of occasions. And so there's that dark element as well. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's pretty tough, but it's also important. I've devoted my life to making low-cost vaccines for the world. 100 million doses of our vaccines have been administered, showing that it's possible to bypass the big pharma companies to get vaccines out there for people who need them. But now this has become, I realize, maybe almost as important in terms of saving lives as countering the very aggressive anti-vaccine activism.
Are you still hopeful that we're going to, for the world's view on vaccines, as we're talking about this complicated way that misinformation and lies and targeting things, and I mean, I'm just asking that because there's people still in their Facebook threads that are just disengaging. That seems to be the solution, where it's like, well, I can no longer, people are just disengaging from each other. It's just making the echo chambers stronger. Even where, we need to have conversation about this. Are you still hopeful that we're going to go to a better place with this?
Well, I always remain hopeful, and, optimism is important, but these are dark times, especially in the U.S., where the anti-vaxxer in chief is also now the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and every few days he comes out in a very public way with some zinger that completely goes against what the science says, and then I'm out there debunking it. But I think your second part of your question gets to a very important point: is it's reaching those individuals who are walled off from the information. For instance, the point I was making about debunking the Florida Surgeon General and what he was saying about turbo cancers and mRNA vaccines. I mean, I can go on CBC or CNN or MSNBC and detail the evidence, why it's absurd, but it's not always reaching the people who are watching Fox News and Joe Rogan podcasts and who are being inundated with disinformation. And that's, I think, one of the big challenges is, North America now, we're seeing kind of two separate societies arise, and reaching those individuals is really complicated, as evidenced by this horrific measles epidemic that's now taken the lives of two otherwise healthy kids in West Texas and now in the Panhandle.
And just as a last question to follow up to measles, the case that I mentioned, that the health officials saying cases didn't have any known contact to an infected person, is it known that measles can spread that way, or is this an unusual moment?
Yeah, good question. One of the reasons why measles is so highly contagious is the virus is very hardy and can remain suspended on microparticles in the air sometimes for a couple of hours. So you could be at an event, let's say, where someone with measles had been a couple of hours earlier, and even though you're not in direct contact with that individual, the virus can still linger, and that's where we can start to see it. If you're not vaccinated, or if you're an infant not yet old enough to receive the MMR vaccine, that's where the problem is. So when people talk about health freedom, medical freedom, often I say, what about the health freedom of a parent who is fearful of bringing their young infant out and about in a place of shopping or a restaurant because they're worried about their baby catching measles, and we have to consider that as well.
Dr. Peter Hotez, a pleasure to have you with us on CBC and in Winnipeg. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Peter Hotez is an American pediatrician and world-renowned virologist. He's also the author of The Deadly Rise in Anti-Science, A Scientist's Warning. Tonight at 7 o'clock, he will be giving a free talk if you want to attend. It's at the University of Manitoba. It is about the rise in anti-science sentiment. I want to mention, as I always do at this time of the show, Radio Noon, because it's on between noon and 1. And as you might know, if you listen to that program, between 12:30 and 1, host Marjorie Dalhouse has her call-in of the day. And today, They picked something a little bit fun. They're asking you about buzzworthy television shows. What are you watching? What are you addicted to? So you can swap and share, and that's between 12:30 and 1 o'clock with the live call-in today here on CBC's Radio Noon. We've had a very quiet commute this morning. It is late in the drive, but if you do need to reach us, 788-3093. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's sunny, breezy, and 13 degrees. It's going to be a windy one. We're headed to a high of 26, and that wind by noon is going to be south 50, gusting to 70. Well, if you're planning to fly to the U.S. this summer, you'll have fewer options. WestJet is suspending or reducing some flights between Winnipeg and American cities. The move comes amid reduced Canadian demand for travel south of the border and the depletion of a provincial flight subsidy fund. The Winnipeg Airports Authority says WestJet flights between Winnipeg and Los Angeles will be suspended starting June 1st. Flights between Winnipeg and Las Vegas will be suspended for July and August, and the frequency of flights between Winnipeg and Atlanta will be reduced to twice a week from 5 times a week. Crime in downtown Winnipeg is declining, but shoplifting? Still a problem. These are just some of the takeaways as Winnipeg police released their annual statistical report. Shoplifting increased 41% last year compared to 2023. Officers say increased enforcement is a big reason. Downtown Family Foods owner Kishan Zalawadia says he would like to see even more of a police crackdown.
To prevent the theft, yes, sometimes we catch them, but we know whom we can stop. Not everyone, especially when someone is looking threatening.
Zalawadia says the store reports thefts to police, but he's concerned it takes too long. He would like to see faster responses to shoplifting. A Winnipegger whose license was suspended during a crackdown on cannabis-impaired driving says police are using flawed tests. Sean Vipond was stopped after he went into a dispensary. He says police swabbed his mouth for traces of cannabis, and he tested positive, even though 20 hours had passed since he had consumed the drug.
If you consume regularly, you simply will not pass that test, no matter how careful you are being to follow the law and to follow, what is right, which is to not drive while you're high. You can still get flagged and get suspended.
Experts say while oral fluid tests can detect cannabis in the system, they are not an accurate way to assess level of intoxication. Winnipeg police say their drug screening equipment is approved by the Criminal Code. Manitoba parents are being encouraged to vaccinate their children as the number of measles cases has now jumped to 20. Manitoba public health officials say low immunization rates in southeast Manitoba have contributed to a spike in cases in the Winkler area. Cases have also been reported in the Dugald area. Ruth Grimes is a pediatrician and assistant professor at the University of Manitoba.
My chief concern is, having more widespread outbreak of measles, having a measles epidemic. I think that would be the fear of every pediatrician and every physician who's caring for children.
Grimes is fielding more questions, she says, from parents concerned their kids' vaccines are up to date. Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe wants to gauge interest in the private sector to pay for massive infrastructure projects. Canoe sent a letter to the Prime Minister pitching a federal-provincial partnership on nation-building strategies. They include creating a trade corridor through the Port of Churchill. Canoe says it's time to expand collaboration efforts in Canada.
To me, these projects make sense when it's not just solely reliant on the public, that it's actually the private sector that's going to drive a lot of the investment and also a lot of the returns. We got a window open right now. Canadians are thinking about these big projects, thinking about how we can build up our economy together.
Canoe says if Manitoba can bring Indigenous partners to the table, it can unlock economic activity here. His letter to the Prime Minister also calls for the completion of the twinning of the Trans-Canada Highway in Manitoba. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says fan support is the lifeblood of any hockey team, and Winnipeg has plenty. Bettman in Winnipeg ahead of the Jets Game 1 showdown against the Dallas Stars yesterday says although there was a decline in ticket sales last season, he didn't think it would be a big issue for the franchise.
I've never worried about Winnipeg long term. You know, you have moments like Sunday night. That's going to be in people's minds for a long, long time, and a connection to the club and to hockey. The Jets brings people of Winnipeg together. It's part of the community. It's part of the quality of life here, and I think people recognize that.
Bettman says the Jets' fan support inside and outside the arena is the reason Winnipeg is an important part of the league. Well, giving up that home ice advantage is what Winnipeg Jets head coach Scott Arniel says his team has done with last night's loss in Game 1 of the series against the Dallas Stars. The Jets fell 3-2. Arniel says his team didn't play like it was a playoff game.
We know the high that we were on coming off that St. Louis game, but man, this is the playoffs. That's a game that, no matter how how you start the game or however you get into the game, it's one of those ones that there's a way we have to play as a group, and that's not how we played tonight.
The Jets will try to even the series at Game 2 right here in Winnipeg tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells. We can catch us in Aaron Broman in our news department. Also our producers, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. Associate producers who worked in the show today, Chidi Akuma, Jim Agapito, and Sierra Sanders, as well as big thanks to our live crew, Brad Lillies, Abby Adiyemi, and Corey Funk, who's given us nothing all morning.
And I will continue to give you nothing. We're actually very quiet commute, so let's keep that quiet commute going.
Thank you, Corey.
No problem.
Abby.
The province is going to be turning out the heat, but up north it's going to be more cloudy. Down south we're seeing sunny and windy conditions across southern Manitoba from Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, Maurice. We will be seeing temperatures warming up 26 to 30 degrees today.
Whew. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening to Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC on 89.3 FM and on YouTube. And The Currents coming up next. We'll talk to you tomorrow.